negative response as well. Dr. Woods, is everyone here to speak to a non-agenda item? Because if there are any agenda items, we can certainly wait for that specific agenda.
All appears to be non-agenda items.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. The first person?
Jamie Markey.
Will you let me know when my time is to begin?
You may begin.
Okay. This is my first time back in a year. It's great to see your faces, not behind a mask. I like to have that personal interaction with you. I also wanted to talk about not what happened to me last year, even though that was extremely traumatic to my family, to the point where one of my daughters began cutting herself because her mom was being treated like a criminal. The one that went up and talked that one day when I wasn't allowed to come in, even though the attorney said that I could. It put a lot of strain on my family, and it wasn't because of something I did, it was because of something members of the board and their staff did. But I want to talk about numbers today. In 2019, Dr. Woods made $357,000, and then this past year he made $398,000. That's 111% increase in pay that he received. In 2019, Mr. Galindo made $183,000, and then this past year made $189,000. That's 100% increase. And this was during a time when teachers were not given a raise at all. And I know that because I was one of those teachers in 2020 and 2021. We weren't even given a step raise, yet our superintendent and many of his staff received a raise. Since 1995, NISD has been allowed to take $3.98 billion of our tax money, and so what they say, help the children and build bigger and better schools. It's more like bigger and better stadiums. And did you know that at the directive of Dr. Woods, principals were forced to coerce their teachers and staff into voting for that $992 million bond? They were told by Dr. Woods that if the bond did not pass, there would be no pay raises from this school year. And you would think that after taking $3.98 billion of our tax money and the money they received in COVID relief, Woods and his board and staff would not need to threaten teachers with no pay raise. And then again, with him stating that, with him coercing people into voting or going to vote.
Ms. Mark, when you're...
No, not. It was yellow.
Okay.
I was watching.
Please stop the time. But before you continue, if this is a personal attack on Dr. Woods, there are other ways to address it and not at this particular.
This is not a personal attack. I'm just giving facts. And anytime I tried to have a one-on-one with any of the people up here, I was not allowed to. So this is my opportunity to speak.
I'm just mentioning that because there is a grievance process. Okay.
And
Please
I tried
continue.
to do that,
She's
but
got
it didn't
your.
work.
She's got your.
Okay. Well, I just would like to say I tried to go through the grievance process and that didn't work. So thank you for mentioning that again. But while he was telling teachers and their principals to go vote, don't you think that's maybe tampering a little bit? So after realizing Dr. Woods was making each year what he was making, I looked up his contract. And for y'all that don't know, it is public information. There's some pretty good benefits in here, and a lot
Ms.
of
Mark,
them.
when your time is up.
Okay, and
Thank
a lot of them are dictated by him.
And we are not. We cannot dialogue by law, but I can ask a clarifying question, Dr. Woods. I know I was here on this board regarding the 2020 and 2021 We did give pay raises to our teachers at that time. Do I remember that correctly?
In the spring of '20, we didn't give anybody a pay increase. In the spring of '21, we did give a modest increase across the board.
I just wanted clarification because I remembered that. Okay, thank you. Next person.
Is Angelita Rodriguez.
Hello, my name is Angel Angelita Rodriguez. I'm come here today to ask for some of the fiscal funds before the end of the year to go to elementary schools without the iron fencing, because some of them have them. I don't know if they had to vote or ask for it, but here I am asking for an iron fence at Carson Elementary, Northwest Crossing Elementary, Fernandez in the front, so that it's not easily run-upable. I would like to know that all doors lock on the inside and classroom doors especially lock on the inside and out. So I also wanted to talk about sanctions. Somebody said something about social media. What about when I see hateful, racist comments? I go to the profile and it's somebody who's on a board. There needs to be sanctions, right? Y'all don't get immunity, huh? No. Because I see a lot of hateful things on social media. I'll click who it is, and they're usually in a law enforcement, in a public sector position, a board member. So I think that needs to be addressed, because I will be calling all that out, all the people that I've seen. Also, the grandparent thing I feel is a very bad idea, because what about single moms? What about everybody else? That's just, and another thing, generational power and hiring within a family, I feel is very inappropriate. What do y'all think? Do you agree?
I'm not understanding what you're saying.
Generational power, where it transfers generational.
We're not here to dialogue.
Okay. In regards to the music video played last week, it said we all bleed the same, so why are we divided? We're divided because there's a premier plan, a preferred plan, and a basic plan at NISD school now for, life insurance or something? What if our kids have a $5 million life insurance? How does that, I get that it's voluntary, but does everybody know that you need the voluntary injury accident to put insurance on your kids at school in case they get injured or death or dismemberment instead? And it's not that much money. You only get $5,000 a kid. I don't know how much the allotment is, but I thought it was $6,100 per kid. Let's see. Time. Is that time?
It is time, and
Okay.
there were several questions that you had and some things that we questioned because we don't understand what you were talking about. If you would, if you have any questions for any of us, please put that in writing and send that to the school district and we'll get back.
I did that last
Any
week.
specific questions?
I did that last week. Just saying.
Next.
Rose Castano.
We will not respond to her.
You see that eye roll? The eye roll she's got?
Karen, Queen Karen?
Yeah.
She does.
Hi. First of all, I would like to thank each and every one of y'all for allowing me to voice my opinions and my concerns. Last week, I went to an open house at Carson Elementary, took my grandson, a wonderful school, beautiful school, awesome teacher. His classroom is at the end of the hallway, way at the end, and just feet away, there's 2 huge glass doors. Now, I know you touched on the safety of the doors and checking them. I don't know if you do it 24/7, this is in the evening. But my concern is his classroom is the first one that they're gonna hit if a criminal shooter goes in. Then just feet away, the next one. So but his classroom, I'm not just concerned about my grandson, I'm concerned about everybody, even the staff, the full staff. So my concern is those doors. Yes, they're checked, and I appreciate that. But I would like to have an alarm on them if they're ajar or not locked by accident, or where I do know that a gun or a weapon is the way I'm gonna put it. It's not the weapon's fault, it's the criminal. And I do say that criminal, he wants to get in, he's gonna shoot that lock and break that glass and get in within seconds. And guess what? My grandson's class is the first one they're gonna hit. Just feet away. Now, I would also suggest iron bars. Not like jail, safety. A little more safety than what y'all touched on. It would the shooter would have to take time, in other words, to get through the bars and to get through the lock on the glass doors and to bust the glass down. By that time, teachers are trained already. You already said they have active shooter training to get the children out. Or, you know, one question that I do have though is, does the staff have any concealed weapons to protect the children and themselves? Do they? Because if that shooter gets in because he's desperate, yes, some kids can get away, but not all. Do they have concealed weapons to protect not just themselves, not just all the staff and the children, but everybody? Especially my grandson. Sorry, I'm here for him. I raised him too. Okay, so yes, my daughter, I'm helping her. She's a single mother of 3. I am very concerned about those doors, glass doors, just being checked without an alarm to alert the front staff that it is ajar or not locked by accident because someone came in with maybe a hangover, maybe a bad day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Craig Billingsley.
Again, I would ask the audience, we're not able to dialogue or answer any questions when we have a speaker, and I would ask you all to refrain from making any remarks as well. Yes, sir.
Looking for my research. Here it is. On the issue of masking or not to mask, there was a PubMed article this is from the National Institute of Health and from the government. In other words, to mask or not to mask, evaluation of cognitive performance in children wearing face masks during school lessons. And in this article, they done a randomized testing on about 133 students. This is in Basel, Switzerland. And after 2 school lessons with control and without intervention, face masks in class, all pupils performed digital tests for cognitive performance regarding attention and executive functions, which, of course, is like tapping, two-back, and flanker tests. Overall, there were no significant differences in cognitive performance between 2 groups, mask versus non-mask, wherein face masks has no significant influence on attention and executive functions of pupils and can be recommended during school lessons. And then, according to this article, it says they always have a conflict of interest statement. The author declared no conflict of interest. They're not taking sides on this issue. Okay, so there was an article from the Psychology Today. And basically, his name is Michael Unger, PhD, Nurturing Resilience. The title of his article was, Will Wearing Masks Affect Children's Emotional Development? And in a very short way of he says children's psychological and neurological development depends on seeing faces. And I, for one, grew up hard of hearing, okay, from birth, and so I'm glad I was not in that time period when we had
my
this
God,
pandemic. I don't know what it would have done to me, but okay. So I'm going to go on, and then lastly, it says here in, let's see, there is another article on autism masking, what it is and more, and it says masking can cause emotional harm such as autistic burnout, emotional distress, and mental health concerns such as depression or anxiety. And so that was their findings on this part of masking. Personally, with the deaf community, they depend on no mask when you want to communicate. 50% of their communication is through lip reading. And the hand signal, the hand signing is only 50% of their communication. So I don't know how the school addresses those issues, but I just want to share that with y'all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Last name is Acuff, A-C-U-F-F.
You decline?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Vera Billingsley.
Yes, I've been a substitute in the district, and I have always valued communication. Okay, I'm a language teacher. And I noticed family-friendly schools is your motto, and that's wonderful. But I'm concurring with my doctor husband. He doesn't care if I call him doctor. He is a degree doctor and also a medical technologist. You should be ADA compliant. American Disabilities means you should consider the families as a whole. Their children and themselves should not have to wear a mask. It is detrimental to their health. And that is part of the reason we're here to support her, because we have inside information that maybe you don't have concerning the health issue that masking causes. And the other thing that I have seen and I've heard from my neighbors, that the libraries have books that are occult in nature and talk about witchcraft and demonology, and we're very concerned about that, because the things that children put in their heads, though they may be considered entertainment, can cause some aberrant behavior on their part. Because at young age, they take things literally and to heart, more so than age later in their high school years. So we're just very concerned about that you would look into that, the libraries of our
How
schools.
about the porn?
Because I personally have seen some books that bother me, and I think the Bible needs to be put back in the school. And there was a representative years ago that said that we are allowed to have the Bible back in the school and in the classroom if somebody wants to read it. And why? My question would be, why isn't that being implemented? It was just put into, say, the curriculum here and there, but they put 7 pages in a book about Islam and only 1 page about Jesus Christ and the Christian church. And I thought, that's kind of not our country was founded. Our founders were all Christian, and they gave us the Constitution, which we need to follow. Thank you.
Thank y'all. That ends our citizens to be heard portion of this meeting. Next item on the agenda is consent agenda. Is there a motion?
People that signed it. It's usually not that.
I'm coming every day.
I wanna hear the curriculum part.
I move approval, but there's a couple of things in relation to facilities that I just wanted to point out and make sure that trustees had a chance to look at or just be aware of. So, item number, let me get to it, guys, I'm sorry, give me just a second. So item number L, the interior colors of, on Leon Valley Elementary School. There's boards in the office, and I want to thank, I'm trying to think that, Leroy, that's, LPA. That's LPA, right? Anyway, the building committee looked at the presentation of the interior colors, and there were some areas in it that we asked them to come back and change for our review. And so I apologize, that's one of the reasons I was late to the dais, is I wanted to check the boards, and they did a good job, I thought, on addressing the areas that we were talking about. Y'all agree?
I did.
Leroy and Jacob, that they addressed what we had talked about in building? What it is that.
Ms. Chumley, I'm sorry, is your mic on?
Yes,
Okay.
we were changing the flooring in part of it,
I can't do that.
and so there's some old that runs into new, and I just want to thank them for coming back and taking a look at that, to address that. And then the other is kudos to Jerry Lamers and Alamo Architects. They had done a couple of presentations on colors on the interior of John Jay on the Fine Arts Building. They did a really good job. We asked them to come back and just add a little bit more color. I think the orange looks a little bit more burnt orange than what it did before, but maybe not. We'll have to see if the superintendent had something to do with that. But I just wanted to say thank you to them. So when y'all get a chance, take a look at the boards in the office, because they added some color. The auditorium is just unbelievable, and the band hall rooms just look amazing. They really did. And so I just wanted to say thank you for them coming back and paying attention to what the request was on that. And with that, I move approval.
Second. Thank you. We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is under curriculum and instruction. HB3 annual report and goals. Dr. Jordan?
Yes, thank you, President Freeman, Dr. Woods, and Board of Trustees. This evening, I'll be presenting the House Bill 3 annual report and goals, which, as you know, is required by law. This report was discussed in detail at the August 9th ISO meeting. That's the Evaluating and Improving Student Outcomes training that was held actually the day after academics. So as you're aware, House Bill 3 requires districts to adopt goals in 3rd grade reading, 3rd grade math, as well as in CCMR, College Career and Military Readiness. These goals must be reviewed by the board, and progress towards these goals, they must be posted on the district's website, and they must be set for a 5-year period. So a target is set for each of the years of 5 years. So when we set the required goals for the 21-22 school year, we really were trying for it not to be just a shot in the dark. The previous data we had back from 2019, then we know we had a COVID year and we had some learning loss. So what you see here are what we put into place to help us have some sort of metrics that made sense. So we reviewed a 5-year trend of data to understand the district's current state, since we knew we had a lapse of data. Then we also knew that we had learning loss for COVID, and actually did some research to see, what is the typical learning loss in reading, what is the typical learning loss in math. We then set annual targets, and what's important to remember that these annual targets are for student performance at the meets level. Typically, when we look at performance, we look at approaches, but this is a higher standard at the meets level. So this next slide will show you our progress. So if you take a look first at grade 3 reading, we exceeded our goal by 7 percentage points. As a matter of fact, our performance exceeded where students were at the meets level in 3rd grade reading pre-COVID. So we're very excited about that, but what we also know is that we must continue to focus on foundational literacy, especially for our earliest learners. And as you'll see in the ESSER presentation, especially for our students who are receiving special education services and are emergent bilingual. In grade 3 math, we actually grew 15 percentage points from the year prior. Although we grew 15 points from 21 to 22, we fell short of the annual goal with 9 percentage points. And so as we anticipated it would take multiple years to regain progress in math, and it will take us, but we actually had some more growth than we anticipated. As for the CCMR required goal, we're seeing some bright spots. We're seeing students be more successful in on-ramps. We're seeing a higher number of students take and pass dual credit courses. We fell slightly short 4 percentage points of our 58% goal. So we will continue to double down on those particular areas. So that takes us then to a revision to these goals. So one thing to take a look at is you look at 26-27. So the requirement is that districts again set annual targets for a 5-year period. So notice on this is reading, notice that we start with our performance in 21-22 at 49% at the meets level. Remember, that starting point was our ending point of this past year where we exceeded our expectations of 7%. So our recommendation, which we discussed at ISO, is to have an increase of 1 percentage point at the meets level through 2027, and that will have our students in grade 3 reading at 54% at meets, which is actually a high standard at that level of passing. For mathematics, again, notice for 21-22 that we start at 36% at the meets level. That's where we ended this last year. We know that we grew from 21 to 22, 15 percentage points in math, even though we were 9 percentage points lower than the goal. So we are recommending that we start at 36, but that we plan on a 10 percentage point gain. From the last several years, we saw a 23 percentage point gain, then we saw a 10 percentage point gain. That will get us to 46%. Then we recommend 1 additional percent, which will have us at the 50th percent at the meets level in 2027. For CCMR, we're recommending a 2% steady increase, which will result in 64% meeting CCMR targets by 26-27. And remember, that covers a whole host of things from industry standard certifications to how students are doing on the TSIA, all of those indicators for college readiness. So this next slide is really what needs approval. So again, we're required with House Bill 3 to show you how we did on the goals we set, to show you any tweaking of the goals that we recommend. So this is the tweaking that we had talked about at ISO. So that's it.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Jordan. Dr. Harrell, did you have a question?
I did, real quick. A couple times you mentioned areas where teachers were going to, and I'm sure your department were going to double down. Can you, and I saw you shared some of the strategies or the personnel or structures that you're gonna have in place. Can you expand for those who weren't at the ISO training?
Sure, and it's really not structures and strategies we will have in place. They're structures and strategies we already have in place. So, I think I'd shared with you guys last year, at the beginning of the year, our revised mathematics plan, which includes working from concrete modeling, even at the middle school level, before we move to abstract. So that particular concept has been integrated throughout the curriculum in mathematics. That's just one example. We have implemented a problem-solving strategy to where it's the same implementation, so a student in first grade, and second grade, and third grade isn't having to learn new vocabulary. With ESSER funds, we've been able to supplement some of our instructional resources for our learners for Tier 1, but also for Tier 2 and Tier 3 intervention. We have continued to go, which you'll see in the next presentation on ESSER, we've continued to go very deep with our screeners, where we do a beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of year, which is really predictive of how students will perform on STAR. And so the screeners alone don't change anything, it's what we do in between. So really my response, and I'm looking out, Patty's not here, there's really nothing huge and new. It's continuing to work this plan and knowing that although we're really making tremendous progress, we still have areas that we've got to continue to focus on, such as our special ed students and our EB students.
Ms. Chumley?
Okay, I had a question, thank you, Bobby, because that, Janice, because when I looked at this, but there's two other areas though, there's the approaches, there's the meets, and then there's the exceeds. Masters. And so, because when I was looking at this, I thought, okay, we're saying that only 54% of our kids will meet third grade reading, but we have a group though that masters that, so there's three different levels in relation to this, and I think that I know, at least to me, that can be confusing on what we're looking at. If you're a parent saying, well, you only want half our kids to succeed, and that's not what this really is indicating.
Yes, not at all, and I'm so glad you brought that up, Ms. Chumley. So typically, we talk about approaches, and what approaches means, it's actually a terrible name. Because approaches sounds like you don't quite get there, that you get near, but students who meet approaches meet the standard. They have passed the STAR, which means they have shown proficiency on their grade level essential knowledge and skills. Meets is simply a higher standard, and which also can be interpreted as, if you have a third grader who hits meets, that means that third grader has shown proficiency in the third grade text and also shown some proficiency in knowledge and skills beyond third grade. So meets is a higher cut score, and masters is the highest, that's the advanced cut score. So yes, this plan right here is a result of House Bill 3, and as I've mentioned before, this actually is simply something that we have to do. We work on all three of those levels. And so when you look at approaches, it's much higher when you look at just the approaches, because that will include, the meets and the masters.
Well, thank you for explaining that, because I've always thought that this really isn't fair, that the way that it's, and for us to set, because it makes it look like we're setting goals that are lower. I don't want to be the parents of the ones that are on the other 50%. So I just wanted to point that out, because it's just not, it's not fair, because we want high rigorous standards for all of our students.
Of course.
And I think that what we've seen with the growth that they have made in the last year, with the way that they have grown with the loss of learning that we were anticipating and the growth they've made, I think shows a lot more the success that we're having in our classrooms than this. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out because I think as a parent, it can be really confusing. And we do have high standards for our kids. Thank you.
Dr. Harrell?
No, I was just gonna piggyback on that. I too, when we were meeting, I'm glad that it's at the meets level because even when our students obtain approaches, even according to the state, they're gonna need extra help, tutorials or intervention. Approaches is, they pass the STAR, but they're still going to need help. So the good thing is the goals are set at meets. Be kind of cool to think of what masters could be, but meets at least is a higher bar. So thank you for having the goals around that.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Saldana? Is that your, okay. Okay. One other comment. We measure our successes in Northside in several different ways. STAR may be one of them, but we have several other ways in which we measure our successes. But I appreciate the work that you've done on these particular goals. Dr. Woods, did you have any comments?
No, it really is an exercise in compliance as required by legislation from 2 sessions ago. So we do need the board to consider action on this item.
Okay. Any further discussion?
I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve our HB3 goals. Mr. Medina, you have that glimmer in your eye. Did you have something to say?
Well, as chair of the academics committee, we did review the evaluating, improving, and as Dr. Woods shared, it is part of our legislative and our governance body to make sure that we're improving student goals and setting ambitious goals. I think these are considering the assessment that will transition to a new set of questioning and how it's being presented to the child. So I wanted to make sure that we are aware of that, but definitely we're setting our students definitely for forward thinkers, and so sorry about that. I know our names are switched when you're asking for Saldana.
Oh, I apologize. You're right. We'll have to. My brain's not thinking in that direction.
Never does.
Thank you for calling that to my attention. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the HB3 goals as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is our 12-month ESSER review.
Yes, thank you. I'll now be providing another required report, which is the 12-month ESSER review for expenditures of ESSER 3. If you recall, we provided a required 6-month review in January, and we'll be providing an 18-month review in January of 2023. So as you're aware, ESSER funds are intended to mitigate the challenges from the pandemic. We had ESSER 1, which it was intended to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the virus. ESSER 2 extended ESSER 1's purpose, but then began providing funds to mitigate some of the social and emotional impact. And finally, ESSER 3 focuses on safely opening schools and sustaining operations while addressing the learning loss caused by schools closing. So as you see here, our district was allocated just over $173 million in ESSER 3 funding, and that funding is through September 2024. Again, something I always mention, one of the requirements is that 20% of the funds are required to address learning loss by focusing on student learning, and our budget is over 65% focuses on learning loss, so we're directing it to schools and classrooms. As a reminder, this looks very familiar. These are the typical things allowable, and you should recognize some of these initiatives. So typically for ESSER 3, we're looking at academic supports for students. We're looking at whole child supports, wraparound services, social and emotional learning, mental health, then of course the health and safety piece, and supporting our nurses and our clinics. So what's required in our 12-month review? Well, first, we must review and revise a required plan that every district has to have, and the title of that is Return to In-Person Instruction and Continuity of Services. So although we've been back, that's still the name of the plan, and it talks about what we're doing to keep students safe and to address the learning gap. That plan is updated and it's posted. The second is update and maintain required postings. So in addition to the plan, the continuity plan, we also post our ESSER plan. And then finally, we need to progress monitor our results. So what is the effectiveness of the initiatives as reflected by student achievement, specifically in reading and mathematics, and then also other factors such as discipline and attendance that tell us more about the whole child. So this next slide represents a wonderful partnership with budget. So you'll see that this is an overview of ESSER Year 1 current expenditures. And notice this is through August 1st, 2022, that we've spent roughly 70% of the Year 1 budget. What is not reflected here is the final payroll for summer school, our enrichment and our remediation in summer school through the end of August. And there are some other non-payroll purchases. We're anticipating the 70% expenditure is going to be much higher. And I know it's been a long time since January, but when I presented this to you in January, 6 months, we were at 20% expenditure, and that was 6 months in, due to vacancies and some things moving slow through not just the north side system, but through the state system. So this next slide also shows you the progress that has been made. So there were 295 positions that were funded from the ESSER budget. The majority of these are positions that are on campuses, working directly with students and with teachers. When we met with you in January, there were quite a few of these that had not been filled. At that time, we weren't wanting to pull teachers from the classroom. There was a whole host of reasons for that. Well, now 85% of these positions are indeed filled, with 15% not filled. So that means 49 of the 295 aren't filled. The ones that aren't filled, we're digging into those really to see, are there any that we just need to scrub from the budget altogether? So we're certainly in those conversations. But I will tell you, out of that 49, they're high turnover positions. There are learning.
Excuse me, Ms. Jordan. Thank you, ladies. And if you have any questions, let us know. Good to see you.
So they're typically high turnover, such as the learning tree positions that, we never have enough. There was something, the clinical assistants, the 12 clinical assistants, that was something we're going to provide our nurses with much needed support. We still have 12 vacancies for those positions. So this next
Dr.
slide.
Jordan, before you go any further, when we talk about positions that were created, Dr. Woods, these are all temporary positions? And so none of the monies were put into any salaries that would be of a recurring nature?
No, there are, because the nature of federal stimulus dollars is that they're temporary, as Dr. Jordan said, they expire in September of 2024, literally 2 years away. They are by definition temporary positions.
Even our nurses that you just mentioned and such.
That's correct. They are purely to get us through the return to school from COVID, and unless the federal government acts to extend the life of those funds, those dollars will go away.
Thank you. Thank you. So this next slide shows large-scale initiatives that are made up of a variety of actions that really represent, kind of large expenditures. So you'll see the largest one was retention pay. All Northside staff received a retention pay stipend of $1,000, and our long-term substitutes received a retention bonus. So that was just over $14 million out of this year's budget. No surprise, reading. House Bill 3 reading, nearly $12 million for initiatives directly for students, and we've seen the needle move. We've also, had our teachers within reading academies, and we were able to stipend our teachers. Remediation and enrichment, that's really summer school, but what's important to know is we do enrichment in summer school. And because that's as important as remediation. So that was $6.4 million. And again, that was supplemented with state comp dollars. You're very familiar with the social emotional support and family engagement. We've had multiple academics meetings where we've really delved deeply into that particular work. And then mathematics and closing the gap there with our students' performance to not only return to pre-COVID levels, but even move beyond that. So at this point, what we want to do is now let's look at student performance, and that is related to these initiatives. So this slide right here is what we call IRI, our informal reading inventory data. This data shows our students' growth on basic reading comprehension and reading accuracy skills. You'll note that this is broken down into race and ethnicity as well as student performance groups. So the key really is to look across the bottom, and what you'll see is that all of our students made progress on the reading inventory, grew over time from last year, except for our Asian group and our students receiving special education services. So we've talked quite a bit. We talked a lot in ISO that some of the targets for different ethnicities are set by the state. We do not set them. And our Asian population, we have refugees that we love to welcome to our schools. We have unschooled, some that are unschooled, which is unique to Northside. And so we are continuing to work to close the gap in the particular areas that you do not see green. This next one shows third grade performance on the iStation reading assessment. That's called iSIP. iStation is an online intervention that our students use. And what I want you to notice is that it shows those yellow bars show students' progression. So BOY means beginning of the year, MOY means middle of the year, and then EOY means end of the year. Notice that those are bookended by star scores of the previous year and then at the end of the year. Several things to note. You want to see things increasing, because what it means is when students take that BOI and we get the data, we do something about it. We target the specific skills that data tells us where students need additional support, so that when we get to MOY, we see it higher, and then we get to EOY, we see it even higher. Last thing I want you to note is look how close the EOY and the actual star score is. So, as I said before, really this year, we're not rolling out anything huge, new, and different. We're continuing to go deep in the initiatives that we've begun. This is one, really making sure that the gap in between each of these BOI, MOI, that we're customizing instruction for our students.
Dr. Jordan, before you leave the slide, Ms. Chumley has a question.
No, I just was gonna comment that was one of the things we were really excited about, that the end of year was so close to, and really was a predictor of how well the kids were gonna do on the STAR, and that we were really pleased with that screener that we're using, the ISIP.
Yes.
That was something I thought that was really interesting in academics when we talked about that.
Did I hear, so are we moving away from iStation and going more to?
Well, for our screener, we're using MAP for math, we're moving to MAP for reading, but students will continue to use iStation as an intervention. And so this next one compares north side to north side at the approaches level. This is at the approaches level. That's why those numbers aren't the same numbers you saw at the meets level. And so what you see here, this is in reading, you see many double-digit gains of our students' reading performance from one year to the next. In English 1 and 2, the standards changed. And anytime standards change, you typically see a flat line or a little bit of a dip. So this data, the screener data, the informal reading inventory, and then STAR scores are showing us that our students are improving in their particular reading skills. And as I mentioned before, we are continuing, it's that early literacy that is a huge focus, continues to be a huge focus for us. Now when we move to mathematics, so this looks very similar to what we looked at with ISEP. So this is for third grade math. This shows third graders' performance, again, beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year. This says winter and spring, but it's middle and end of the year. Again, if you look at the yellow bars, you'll see that students are increasing proficiency, not as steep of a rate as reading. So we want to continue, to move that needle. But again, you see the end of year at 64% and STAR at 66%. That's very, very close. So what that tells us is when we get that beginning of the year data in the fall, that's given us some really good information about exactly where students are. So we feel that continuing along that path is going to help us create a steeper stair step. This next slide you've seen multiple times. Again, this is at the approaches level. Students' performance in 2021 in STAR Math, their performance in 2022. And again, although we need to continue to focus on math, we're seeing the needle move tremendously. Now we're very aware that STAR is going to look different this spring. There's going to be some open-ended that's moving away from all multiple choice. So we've been preparing certainly students and teachers. We actually celebrate some of the changes. So that's going to be really interesting to see the growth of our students. This next slide shows Algebra 1. As you know, we are 8th graders take Algebra 1, and it's also a 9th grade course. You see nice gains there. And then to wrap up, Science and Social Studies. Although the majority of our ESSER funds has been reading and mathematics. We know reading and math are the cornerstone of science and social studies. You have to be very adept at that, and we see growth there as well. So when we talk about these things that we're using ESSER funds to close the gap, reading and mathematics, very, very important. But we also know there are other indicators we need to be looking at. One of them is discipline. Are we seeing less incidents of discipline? Are students coming to school on a regular basis? When we move into having our surveys more widespread, what are the perceptions of students? How comfortable do they feel at school? So this next slide shows some discipline results. These are code of conduct, discipline incidences. And so it shows a three-year period, and you'll notice a similar trajectory. Start off with a honeymoon when it starts, then you see some peaks and valleys, and then of course you see the anomaly in 1920 in March, because that's when schools closed and folks were at home. So we're actually digging much more deeper into this data about where, what discipline incidences are decreasing, what areas are increasing. We look at it according to student group, we look at it according to race, ethnicity, to see what support students need. Then one of the last pieces we look at, and this is a huge focus for our district. It's one of the goals in our district improvement plan, and that is to improve attendance. Prior to COVID, we were starting to decline in attendance. So it was not a COVID issue. COVID has just vastly exacerbated. Now the decline was slight. It was not, it wasn't this huge drop off. But you see from 2017 to 2018, then you see 2018 to 2019, which I know is 1/10 of a point, but you see that continue to slightly drop. 2021, that gray bar, that's an anomaly because we could count attendance with remote instruction in different ways. So you see where we are in 2022. And so we've been really excited. You heard Dr. Wood's comments, kind of cautiously optimistic that school has started with more students and really some efforts to say attendance really isn't optional. We all need to be there, adults and students alike. So just to sum up, because, I was looking back, we had talked so much about ESSER on the front end, and, we started and it almost felt like the wild, wild west. Things were moving so quickly. What are the big humps that we need to focus on? And where, with your direction and with our continued work, we've really been able to put some shape on this first year. And we feel like working with Tiffany and her department, once we get those other August expenses in, we're gonna be pretty darn close to over in the 90% of expending for year one. And we've been adjusting along the way. So when you think, okay, so what does year 2 look like? Year 2 looks like continuing these initiatives that we're going deeply in reading and mathematics and whole child support, continuing in enrichment and remediation. But it also means perhaps readjusting some things. So on this slide, you see there were several things that we were paying out of ESSER year 1 that we're not continuing into year 2. So we had remote conferencing these last few years. We are discontinuing remote conferencing for this next year. So that will save a nice chunk. The reason is it's now 5-day quarantine, not 10-day quarantine, whole host of that. The virtual attendance recovery is also being discontinued. We know students can get attendance recovery at their campus through a variety of ways. To show grace, we allow students to do that virtually. We're stopping that practice. It was what we needed to do at the time, but it also can encourage students. It's pretty easy to get virtual attendance recovery. It can discourage them from coming to school.
So that's gone.
That's gone.
Okay.
That's gone. And so virtual instruction, we did a pared down version at a couple campuses and really monitored that along the way. We've discontinued that practice. And then we've added some things. We know we have the school year redesign that we're looking at Westwood Terrace and Cable. That's going to be some cost. We're looking at expanding some BMC, those are our behavioral units, which is a need for students that we're serving. We're expanding pre-kindergarten. That's going to kick in, the cost to ESSER is going to kick in year 2. And so now we're going to be fully outfitted, which is amazing, especially as we talk about we've got to get our early learners where they need to be in reading and math. And then as I've mentioned, you know, those 49 positions that are vacant, that are still in the budget, we're looking at those very carefully because we're not planning to add any more positions in year 2, especially since we, you know, only have two more years of the grant. So next steps, we'll certainly be sharing with you in academics and anything you want to know more about or any feedback you have, you know, for us to adjust ESSER. Formally for the whole board, we'll be back in January 2023. That will be year 2, 6-month review. And then in August 2023, we'll be doing the same. It'll be the 24-month ESSER review, and we should have some really good a good sense on, you know, the things that we've gone deep in that have really moved the needle. And that's it.
Just mention to the board, Ms. Freeman, that this is required. It's not required for action. It's a report that we're required to do every 6 months, as Dr. Jordan indicated. So we'll be back in 6 months and then back 6 months after that.
Before we move on, any questions? Mr. Medina?
Thank you, Ms. Freeman. So this was reviewed prior during academics committee meeting, and it was thoroughly, you know, etched out. It was, well, a lot longer than this. So the question is, obviously, ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 comes down the pipeline. The clarification regarding ESSER 1. For the public, just understand that money was supplanted by TA in the state, and that money just came into the district as, you want to explain a little bit better, Dr. Woods?
Sure. So the ESSER 1, none of those dollars transferred to the state directly. They were stood up at the state level to provide services statewide, most of which Northside thought was insufficient for our students and did not take advantage of. ESSER 2, to some degree, was supplanted at the state. They also used some of those dollars to assist districts with attendance concerns related to funding, and then obviously ESSER 3, by and large, flowed to districts across the nation. And that was tonight and will always be the focus of these House Bill 3, these ESSER reports, because that's the place where we actually had some discretion in how the dollars get spent.
And just follow along, regarding the programs that are being implemented, there are program evaluations to make sure they are effective and those funds are being used wisely. Thank you.
Mr. Medina? Okay. Next item on the agenda is under Facilities and Operations, Mr. Sandoval, Schematic Design Village at West Point West Area Elementary School.
Thank you. Tonight, we're happy to present to you our 82nd elementary school. Yeah, it was only yesterday, we had a lot less than that. Designed to the Board of Trustees. Obviously, this was discussed in detail at the building committee. Not only are we going to present to you the traditional schematic design, which shows the layout of the facility, the plan, and things of that nature, we're also going to take the liberty to talk a little bit about security. I know that is heavy in everybody's mind due to recent events. And so we're going to refresh the board on the elements that we have currently and that we continue to implement at schools, but also some thoughts about where we're going to go from here as well. So tonight I have Joel Hernandez from Next Gen Architects, who is going to do the presentation for us.
Hi, Joel.
Hello, Ms. Freeman. Dr. Woods, members of the board, thank you very much for allowing us to present to you tonight and to be part of this project. Let's start off with the site analysis of this project. So our project is here at New West Village at West Point Elementary School. And just to kind of orient everyone, it's just west of Hoffman and Briscoe and Mireles and just north of Cole. So Cole is the elementary school that it will be relieving the overcrowding. In terms of our site, this is it here. We basically have 3 streets that border our site here with views in either direction, and we've got kind of a residential area being built. So this is actually further built now than it is shown on this photograph. In terms of topography, we have kind of a high point here with our topography sloping in each of these directions towards the corners. So that's our high point, which is our ideal location for our elementary school. Oops, sorry. So the other thing that this site provides us, because we have bordered 3 streets, Frio River, Blanco River, and Pedernales, it allows us to have 3 entry points, which is something that's ideal in terms of being able to separate kind of our staff, our students or parents dropping off, as well as our buses. So those are ideal. In terms of some images here, I've provided some images here. So our site is here to the right. That's the Esplanade on Frio River. And then this is kind of looking in this direction from that corner. So it'll give you some idea of that Esplanade there. And here's kind of our site here right at the intersection. And then this is looking down Blanco River Run, give you a little sense of kind of the slope of the terrain in regards to our building site, which is right here to the left. And then lastly, kind of from this corner here, viewing northwest, gives you a better sense of kind of how that site actually rises. We drop about 30 feet topography. So let's talk about our site plan. So the way we laid this out, our site, as far as parents, is drop-off is right at the front at Blanco River. That'll lead you into an entry into here, which then leads to the amphitheater. This is kind of a student building, and I'll show that in just a second with the floor plans. And then kind of our more public spaces are off to the east. So we've got cafeteria, gymnasium, kitchen, playground, all of those kind of back of house things as far as kitchen, service yards, and those kinds of things. And then we've also planned, because this area is kind of such a high growth area, rather than planning for our typical 6 portables, we're planning for 8. Let's talk a little bit about site accessibility. As I mentioned, because we have 3 streets fronting our property, it affords us the ability to have 3 entrances. The first one will be used for bus drop-off, so buses will come in, drop off at the back right here under a canopy, which then will allow students to either come into the cafeteria and have lunch in the mornings, or to be used as a staging area for buses as they come in during inclement weather, or they can go directly from their classroom area, which is on this side of the building. Secondly, we have the parent drop-off. So because of our orientation here, we're able to have quite a bit of stacking here to allow plenty of traffic to get off of Blanco River so that we don't impede traffic. I did civil engineering. We will have a deceleration lane, which will allow us to get also some additional cars off of Blanco River. But we're trying to be as good neighbors as we possibly can during those drop-off and pick-up times. So then parents can drop off from there. As far as floor plans, simple, clean plan. As I mentioned, there's that student drop-off, right? So as we come in, got a security vestibule, got a split admin. To the right, we have what I'll refer to more of the kind of public administrative items. So, and you'll see in our enlarged floor plans, that'll have principal, attendance, nurses station, all of those things where parents or the public would engage. And then the other side is more of the kind of private area for teachers, right? So that'll have teachers resource, teachers workroom, teachers lounge, all of the things they need in order to operate properly will be on this side. Then directly in front is our focal point, is the library, and then beyond that is the outdoor amphitheater, which are all standard items in your program. As we move our way due west, we have a pre-K wing here, which is kindergarten as well as pre-K that borders that out. They all have direct access to their own playground area. And then as we make our way around here, we have first grade and second grade. So this whole area here is a 2-story block, and I'll show you the second floor in just a second. Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me, can you, when you finish explaining that, will you go back to the previous slide and show where the teacher entrance and exit is gonna be at? I don't think we showed them the 3rd entry.
Right, you're right. I'll go right back to it in just a second. So I'll just go quickly. As we move our way do east, we do have our gymnasium cafeteria as well as an access that allows the students to go out into the play court area as well as the playground. So we've got gymnasium that's adjacent to the cafeteria, that's adjacent to the platform. The platform is backed up to the music room so they can use for staging during events. I'll go back here real quick. Our staff parking is here. So we have kind of a split staff parking. We'll have some dedicated staff parking here as well as visitor and staff parking as happens in most schools. But teachers will be able to come in here, park, and then pull their way out and either and go out towards Frio River Run is kind of our anticipated thought. Once again, trying to keep buses separate from teachers, separate from parents. And we find that in our designs when we do that, separating all of those, it eliminates kind of that cross traffic and problems that can occur.
Ms. Chumley?
Wait, Joel, go back.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so, we reviewed this in detail at the building committee. So one of the questions asked was why couldn't we have two entrances on the visitor staff parking?
Right.
And, the conversation was that it was better to have the one, it's more control, it gives more stacking, and then also that it's gonna be 2 lanes and going to the right, and then there's the interior lane will be a turn only into the parking.
Correct.
So if you're dropping off, or picking up, you'll be in that right-hand lane, which gives the ability to stack, so like if I'm going there for a meeting at 3 o'clock, I'll be able to still get in and park and go to my meeting. I won't have to wait in the line with all the parents to make it around to the parking lot to get in. Cause we have that at one of our schools, and I can't remember which one, it's in one by Stevens High School up on the
Please
hill.
don't say me that.
Anyway, so that, that was something that was a concern. So
Right.
that was what you had explained. We
Correct.
don't think we can get approval either, and it makes, messier parking or coming into the school if we try to have 2, right?
Correct.
On it. So let me ask you on, go ahead and go, cause I think my question is on the,
Floor plan.
is on the floor plan.
Okay.
We'll get to the floor plan.
So, in terms of circulation, we wanted to have a clear circulation plan so that students as well as visitors can find easy access. So in terms of an administrator, they can literally stand pretty much here and there and be able to monitor 90% of their facilities. So that was important in terms of the overall design. There's nothing worse than going into a school and after a few turns not realizing where you are anymore and how to get out. So we wanted to make sure everybody knew how to get around the school very easily. In terms of, these are some enlargements. So as I mentioned, as you come in, we'll have a security vestibule. Once you get vetted, you're able to come in, principal, secretary, conference room, all those kind of things that we talked about in terms of some of the public spaces that would, they would interact in terms of anything dealing with their student or child. And then in addition to that, on the left-hand side, we'll have teacher's lounge, teacher's workroom, teacher's resource, those kinds of things. As we come in, we'll have a lobby area which will have access into the library. As we make our way towards east is where we'll get into the cafeteria, and I'll show that in just a second, cafeteria gymnasium. But as we make our way due west, we'll have some specialized classrooms along the way, and then once again, that pre-K kindergarten area that has direct access to the outside to that private playground.
Joel, wait,
Yes.
go back.
Yes, ma'am.
To that one? Okay, so secretarial, so we have, and when we walk in, we've got the secure lobby.
Right.
Then they come in, and where you have principal, is that the actual waiting area?
That's the reception.
That's the reception area, right?
Yes.
Okay, I wanna make sure of that. Okay, so that's the reception area. And so then you'll have your assistant principal, then you have your principal, and then the principal, or the conference room, the admin conference, and then that's ISS, that's in-school suspension,
Yes, sir. Ma'am.
right there?
Yes, ma'am.
I thought we usually had like a classroom for
No.
that. Do we not
No,
have that?
It's a much smaller space.
Yeah, we've actually eliminated the space related to storage, so ISS is not no longer in the plan.
So don't we have ISS? We still
I'm gonna
have
ask Ray.
ISS in
We do.
elementary school.
Typically, it's very small, very few
Yeah.
kids.
But we still have it, so we still need to have a space for it.
In
don't we?
general, and there is, frequently it happens in the office area,
Right.
because obviously.
But we
it's-
kept the space
as
in
well.
case we needed it, obviously, so that we make it accessible. And it's in that geographical area where
And historically, we've put it where it can be monitored by someone
Okay,
that's
but
there.
we're not
It's not-
turning that into a storage room, we're actually still gonna be able, cause sometimes kids need that.
It's
that
true,
way
but there are,
too.
there are many days where there's no one.
There's no one in there, but do we have, I thought we had an individual ISS teacher on our elementary campus.
We have an instructional assistant who also gets cross-trained to help with lots of other areas.
Other areas as well on that. Okay, all right, so that's the reception, so that made it better. And then I know that there was one thing that principals have told us in the past, is that they would like to be able to walk out of their office, if there's someone waiting in the reception areas, be able to walk out their office without that visual there. And, so I don't know, will it be,
Well, this
you
is,
know, maybe they'll just put
I mean-
seating over on this side so parents can't look down the hallway.
right,
I just know that it's caused, principals have just said that it's, like they have to go out for an emergency or there's something
they have a
that,
back way out to be able to
Right.
get back to the school.
it's kind of that area.
is that area
Going to
there.
the
Yes.
front.
Okay. All right, and then I've got a question on the music area, but I'll wait till you get there.
I'm there now.
All right.
So as we make our way to the public area here, we've got all the kind of support systems, gymnasium storage, all those kinds of things, as well as our cafeteria, standard Northside kitchen, platform, some restrooms, and as you mentioned, Ms. Chumley, we have our, and that's actually missing a door from that corridor, now I see it. So that music room has direct access, so the accessible entrance to the platform, which is raised, doubles up as a kind of private entrance for that music room during performances and things of that nature, as you do in almost all of your other elementary schools, so that's pretty standard. But it should have a door there, I just noticed it.
Okay, that's what I was gonna
Yes.
ask, but back to the, I'm sorry, to the first floor plan, on that reception area,
Yes.
we'll have glass on those doors, glass at that area,
Where? Here?
right there.
Yes. Typically,
Right.
we have this
Typically
relatively
we
open
have-
because by then you've been vetted. This is kind of the
Yeah,
bullet
that's your lock,
resistance
yeah.
portion of it. Yes,
It's-
ma'am.
Okay, all right, so
You'll have some
we'll
glass.
have the visual
Yes.
piece.
Yes. We'll
Okay.
also have some visual, some windows in the front, as we often do, especially for the principal to, as well as the assistant principal, to be able to see to the front as people are coming in and out of the building. That's always important too. The more eyes, the better.
Okay, and on the music room, there will be a door in the hallway.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I messed up.
No, that's all right. I kind of figured that it just wasn't there, but that you weren't gonna have the only entrance from that. And is this where we can open up, this is our standard design, we can open up the cafeteria and the gym, right,
Yes, ma'am.
on it? PE offices, we have that discussion all the time about, do we have windows or do we not have windows? So I was thinking about, there's now that glass, those windows that you can put in that only have one way, they only look one way out, you can't see in. So why can't we have that kind of glass and have the windows? Cause remember, there's usually
And this one is not a concern because it's elementary. Typically where we find that concern is in middle school or high school because we have a locker area. Here we don't have any lockers.
oh, okay,
So it's just,
so we're gonna
it'll
have
just have natural
we're gonna have the
glass
open
just.
area for,
There will be probably a window there so
Right.
that they could be sit down and see who's inside the gym at any given time. So that would be probably a little window.
But
okay,
the
will we
major-
have one on both sides? So they can see who's walking down the corridor in, and then have a window on the other side where they can see what's out into the,
We can.
Okay.
okay, cause I thought that we were doing that, but I was excited about the glass, cause I hadn't thought about that for those other schools when we talk about you know, we wanna have some more privacy in there, but we could always use the glass that you can only see out and not in. Okay.
Okay, real quick question, and, the elementary schools I've been in, I don't remember seeing ISS or even having them talk about ISS. What I'm hearing more of is like in large counseling areas where they can pull small groups or host like communities in schools or more calming, kind of regrouping areas. And I'm wondering, and it's kind of like on a lot of the new schools I'm seeing, they're building in the Zen rooms and that kind of thing, or definitely in large counseling areas. Are these like the standard, and I didn't go to building committee, but
These are your standard counselor rooms. We do have them facing the corridor so that children can go in and see a counselor anytime they want to without having to go through any type of administrator of any type. They could go directly and see them. So we do try to do that to help students
is there an
use
area
their
where they
counselors
can?
more often.
Well,
but
and
we
that's
don't have an
one-on-one or
additional
one,
new
yeah, but
space.
small, okay, so there's not another enlarged or dedicated area for
No.
counselors to do some. Have any of our principals asked for that, or have we talked to them about?
What is they
for the
take the
counseling
counselor
department?
suite and then they provide an ambience that is conducive to what we was talking about. And usually it's within that suite so that somebody's there with the kids. So we're starting to see that change in some of our
And
schools.
taking over classrooms, I've seen like if you have an extra classroom, they're changing, but I'm wondering in a proactive way if it's already part of this design versus like the office. And I think talking to Kim's folks and finding out if that's kind of where they would like this to go. I don't think it changes anything other than where the walls are, but
The offices are pretty sizable, and we are in conversations with Dr. Ridgely about what does that really mean in a campus like an elementary school and middle school and a high school as well. So we have departmental reviews coming up next, so that we can start getting at those details. How do we enhance that space?
but we're still in the like this is a schematic, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, but Carol, let me just, because, and I understand exactly what you're saying, and I agree with that. However, let me add that fifth graders that have a behavior problem, that could end up with them going to the elementary alternative school. I would still like to be able to know that we have a spot at our elementaries that can allow them to stay at the elementary versus having to go to an alternative school. So I think that there's different levels of what you're talking about. And so I don't want us to say that we discount that we don't have some type of, that type of area as well. And it doesn't has to have a name on it, but I do think I'd rather have a child be able to stay at their elementary than go to the Northside Alternative School for elementary.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm not arguing that. There's all kinds of ways of dealing with behavior, and some, sending a kid to ISS for like one size fits all is not it anymore. So I'm just having multiple opportunities for kids to receive the help they need depending on the behavior they're doing versus the old school ISS, you break a rule, you go kind of deal. And I think we're moving away from that, but I'm just asking if the space allows, the design allows that. Because I would much rather have a kid counseled through his behavior than punished.
Right.
So
we
we'll
will get with Dr. Ridgely to kind of
Appreciate
dive that in deeper. I know we have had discussions about it. So when we get into the next level, we'll get into more detail about what that space should be and how does it look and how does it function.
And make sure the rooms are large enough to have those
Right.
corner areas.
calm corners.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, moving forward as we move our way west. Once again, here's that pre-K kindergarten suite that has the playground with doors to the existing. We have some additional specialized classrooms that are across the hallway from that. which can serve as overflow for pre-K or kindergarten should the need arise. And then as we make our way further west, we've got our first grade classroom with stairs leading up to the second floor, and then our second grade classrooms that also have stairs leading to the second floor. And then we have all our kind of core facilities, mechanical, IDF, restrooms, all of those kind of things in the center. So now moving up to the second floor, as I mentioned, we have that kind of area where all the classrooms are, is directly stacked and just a duplicate of downstairs. So we have third grade up at the top with some additional specialized classrooms noted in green. Then we have our fourth grade wing, and then basically our fifth grade wing. Once again,
Does code require that we have stairs on every corner, on every end?
yes, we need to have two means of egress, and we can't have a corridor longer than 20 feet. It would be considered a dead-end corridor. So that, you don't want to go thinking there's an exit, then have to go backwards.
Remember on our other one seeing stairs at the end of every of the building?
Well, it depends on the layout, honestly.
Right.
Because this is kind of a T shape, and the distances may be too long by code. That's probably what you'll start seeing.
At Tomlinson, we had basically, this was a bigger mass. It was double stacked, and we had it on one end and the other, but that was
So
it.
we're trying to avoid, Ms. Shumley, to have a real long, skinny.
Oh, yeah.
Because from a management perspective, what our principals tell us is, we need to be able to stand and monitor what's going on. And the T usually will get you that, in a better arrangement for a management
I just
perspective.
didn't remember the stairs on the
You
ends
won't,
of
because they're
all of
long
those.
and skinny, and at the ends, that's probably where they would be.
Okay, here's some enlargements of that second floor. So third grade along with the large classroom and some other smaller specialized classrooms. And then as we move over, we've got fourth grade along with, once again, that core space with all of the mechanical, restrooms, elevators, stairs, and then our second floor, that's actually fifth grade area noted there. So now some quick massing studies. So this is kind of looking from Frio River due northeast. So you start to see the double-story classroom area with the portables in the foreground and the staff parking. This is kind of our parent drop-off, so parents will be able to come off, drop off at that front entry, go right into the school itself. And then in the background, you start to see the gymnasium, cafeteria, as well as the playground. Working our way around, now you see the kind of stacking here of the parent drop-off with that front entry piece, the playground in the foreground, as well as the gymnasium, and then the library and administration. Now this is the back side, so there it is. So we got our bus drop-off here with the kind of classroom wing on top here, library, that amphitheater, that playground for pre-K, and then the gymnasium cafeteria. And then lastly, kind of the view looking due north, doing south west. And that's the playground area and playfields in the foreground with the gymnasium, and then that bus loop right in here. So let's talk a little bit about safety and security. So one of the organizations we look to for kind of best practices is an organization called SEPTA, which is Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. And some of the things that they talk about is kind of this concentric rings of security. And this diagram basically illustrates that the best practices from this group is something that Northside already does. So it kind of starts with that outer ring of Northside Police Department, which then leads to the perimeter site fencing, which then leads to those exterior as well as interior cameras that we have. The next level is obviously getting to the front door and going through a security lobby, and then access controls throughout the facility into the main spaces. And then the most intimate one, which is obviously that lockable classroom door. So these are all the things that Northside already does, which fall right in line with the best practices of what we should be doing. But we're proposing that perhaps we can look at one more, adding one more ring into this equation here. So let's start from the outside in. So the diagram here shows in red where we're proposing to have fencing. And this is after meeting with not only county officials, city officials, the district, police department, and various other departments, just to make sure that we're not leaving any stone unturned in terms of how we want to do our fencing. But we have basically a gate here that separates the kind of staff parking from the bus drop-off. In addition to that, we have another gate here that we needed for fire access, and then a back gate by the service yard that is also for fire access. And all of those gates basically are going to only be used during emergencies. We want to make sure that we're not leaving, much like that stone on the door that we talked about earlier, is that gate being left open. And we've all been to campuses where unfortunately sometimes it's custodian's duty or somebody's duty to go close that gate, and if it doesn't get closed properly, then we have a vulnerability in our security. So this eliminates all of that. So the only time we open those gates is in an emergency situation. So obviously in our first ring we'll have the actual building itself, which will serve as a security ring. And then next we have perimeter fencing, which will secure the additional classrooms that may or may not come in the future as far as portables are concerned. And then last but not least is also security around all of the play fields and playgrounds. Because in many of these situations, as we've all seen, there may be children out there playing at the time that an event happens. So we want to make sure they're secure and that they have direct access into the building quickly. So now let's look at our plan from the inside. So during normal school hours, all of the doors highlighted in the blue stars are locked, right? We all know how those operate. So your only entrance into a school once school has begun is through this front door. And what we're proposing to do is basically separate our building into additional concentric circles. So we're trying to take a large building and break it up into smaller pieces. The way we propose to do that is by adding additional doors in the corridors, which are highlighted and indicated by the red stars there. And then lastly, as I mentioned earlier, the most sacred one is obviously the ones that are those individual circles, which are the individual classrooms. Now those circles will obviously apply for all of these classroom spaces, but I just wanted to highlight one in terms of graphically showing you how we would want to break those up. So what we're proposing to do is add those doors in the corridor, and basically they're a cross corridor door. That's a handful to say. So don't make me say it again, please. So as you can see in the pictures, illustrate what those doors would look like. So the idea is obviously we want to have something that's pretty passive, and more importantly, that is, it adds for another level of security without giving children the impression that they're not in a safe place. We want to make sure that if these doors are activated, they're basically flush with the wall. They can be painted the same color, they can match the wood, they can do any number of things. But as you can see, during 99.9% of it, if you can imagine this door, it's going to be in that open position. You probably won't even notice it. But in the event of an emergency, then those doors are released, and now we've created these additional bubbles, right? And each of those bubbles has two means of egress still, as required by Life Safety Code, but it allows us to break the school up into smaller pieces and allows us to isolate everyone so that in these situations, the last thing we want, as has been mentioned already, is just having someone have free reign. And unfortunately, when you have to read these reports of the events after the fact, we often find that it's not like we see in the movies where somebody goes in, starts shooting up doors, and that's how they gain access. Unfortunately, they gain access because the doors are open. And what we're trying to do is eliminate that or improve the ability to lock it down. And basically what we'd end up doing is creating, in the areas highlighted in red, are these man traps. So now if somebody's in there that shouldn't be, they won't have access into this space. If they're here, they can't go into that space, and they can't go into the library. So the only place they have to go is straight out the front door. And that applies for all of these other additional spaces as well. So Obviously, everyone doing their due diligence is the most important thing, but this is just kind of that next level of redundancy that we may want to consider. This is the second floor, so once again, we're proposing to break it up much like the second floor into 3 pieces. There's where we're proposing the door, so even if someone were able to be an intruder and get in, there's doors at the top of the stairs for each one of those so that they wouldn't be able to actually get to any of the students. And then lastly, there's once again where our doors would be and how they would operate. Creating the red areas once again. So in addition to that, for the exterior, we're proposing that perhaps we look at what we've often seen in kind of college campuses or universities where you have the blue lights and you're able to have those kind of light up when there's an emergency, right? So we could have those inside as well as outside so that if you're in a restroom or whatever, when one of these events happens and the doors get closed up and you're in a bathroom, unfortunately, when that happens, you'll at least have a strobe in there that tells you there's an emergency, which is most likely to tell you to just stay in place would probably be the protocol, as is typically the protocol in most of these situations. So we're evaluating that with facilities and the other departments as well, and see how we best can implement some of those things into this campus perhaps. And with that, I just have kind of an overview of all of the images again and ready to take any questions you may have.
Ms. Shelley?
I wanted to say thank you, Joelle. I think you did a really good job on this, and I appreciate you looking outside the box, and that goes with Leroy and Jacob as well. Thank you for looking at what we can do in incorporating some additional safety features in our design and our design standards. And I know that we already are talking about the alarms on those on the door alarms.
Yes, ma'am.
If a door is ajar, and I know that you had some of that on this as well, but I know that y'all, Leroy, and you and Dr. Woods and Jacob are talking about looking at doing that throughout all of our schools.
That's correct.
As well. So I think you did a great job, and thank you.
Thank you.
I move approval.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley. Mr. Blunt, did you have a question?
Yeah, well, I'll second the motion too, but just one quick one.
Yes, sir.
For the safety and security components we're talking about, the critical components, is backup power also established to those?
Yes.
Generators, so if somebody cuts power or whatever else?
Yeah, we have generators in our elementary schools. They're dedicated for the basic life safety items like fire, PA, phones, elevator, and that will tie into this because we need to operate in case we lose power.
And this system doesn't supersede anything that's life safety, so there's always the opportunity to get out,
So just
like you normally would.
Just a quick bit of that, because I know Joel has done a lot of research on that. One of the things that really was instrumental in trying to do those concentric circles within the campus is any violation of life safety codes, because sometimes security and life safety codes, they kind of butt heads. So we took this to the county because the county would have to approve this. And so not only couldn't find anything that would prevent us from doing these doors, they brought in a representative from the sheriff's department in that conversation and they couldn't find any issues related to that. We also talked to the city of San Antonio, because sometimes we'll get into that discussion with them, and they also said it looks like it's a very doable. It's one of the first of its kind, at least that we have heard. And so we're thankful that Joelle brought that to us, so we could start looking at what the next layer of security. Obviously, we are very concerned about not making it look like a prison inside the campuses and totally outside, so we're going to be very delicate about how we do that and how it actually has a visual impact. That's why those hidden doors are something that we're considering as well. So there may be other elements that we're talking about. I want to thank Chief Carnes, his safety committee, Shane Allard. They brought all these elements to our attention as well, and so they're part of the team, and I know administration has actually reviewed that as well, and so we'll continue the discussion.
Rightfully so, they put me through the grinder to make sure it works, so.
Well, so at building committee, we had Chief Carnes and we had Chief Carnes there to talk about the doors and how it would work with our police department, and so we appreciated his input. as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Good job.
This is up for approval, so we have a motion and a second on the floor. Any other questions or discussion? Okay, so all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Ayes have it, motion carries. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate it.
you.
Once again, thank you for the opportunity from all of us at Next Gen. Appreciate it.
All right. Board members, next item on the agenda is redistricting.
Budget.
Oh, I am so sorry. I was way ahead of myself.
But Karen, I was gonna ask, since we have our attorney and we have our demographers, if we don't move the agenda around and do our redistricting now,
I'm gonna ask Dr. Woods for his opinion on that, because I think the items under the,
I know you're dying there, Renee, but I'm sorry.
I think the items might go pretty quickly. Dr. Woods, under budget and finance.
I agree. I think the number of times that we've looked at the business and finance items going back to February, as I stated earlier, I think they're gonna be fairly rapid fire, because the board has seen in-depth conversation on these kind of ad nauseum. And so I think we can these are required to be done tonight, because obviously our new fiscal year begins September 1. So I think that can go relatively quickly and really could not be delayed beyond tonight.
Okay, so if it's okay with the board, I'd like to go ahead and continue under budget and finance. Good idea, Ms. Chomley.
Ask about it.
Yes, thank you. All right.
So just quickly, we've talked about the closeout of the 21-22 budget quite a bit. We've talked about the 22-23 budget quite a bit, and all of the assumptions that underlie it, and this brings us to the culmination of that. As members of the board know, there is a small surplus to the current year budget that will be committed in fund balance to instructional continuity, which we will then use to help us pay down what we anticipate to be a fairly significant deficit in the next budget in 22-23. We'll also ask, as Dr. Barajas stated earlier, for the board to consider 2 defeasance resolutions that will allow us to pay down debt early. Both of these serve that purpose. That's what a defeasance is. It's simply paying off debt earlier than anticipated. There is the item that we discussed last week that I know I've mentioned to each of you relating to the purchase of attendance credits with regard to what the state likes to call excess revenue, which, as we've said, does not apply to us and will not apply to us in the short term. And then finally, the adoption of the budget and the tax rate that goes with it. So Dr. Barajas is going to walk through each of these items, not in a lot of detail, because we've shown you that detail over all these many months. Each of these items does require consideration this evening to both close out this year's budget and to kick off the New Year's budget.
Dr. Barajas.
Okay, the first item is the final amendment to the 21-22 budget. As Dr. Woods pointed out, while we were predicting to be in the deficit, we now show a $19.9 million surplus in the general fund. Nothing really major regarding child nutrition and debt service, which are the other 2 funds for amendment number 3.
Okay. This was discussed again before and presented actually in the last board meeting. As Chair of Finance, Mr. Lopez, do you have any comments?
Yeah, no,
Motion.
again, as we have already discussed this several times already, I move that we approve the budget amendment number 3 for fiscal year 21-22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the budget amendment number 3. Any additional comments or questions? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Ayes have it, motion carries. Thank you. Item number B, commitment of fund balance.
Again, this is required at the end of the year to have the board commit a portion of the general fund's fund balance. There is only one commitment now in the general fund. It is instructional continuity, and we are asking the board to increase the commitment from 190 million to 215 million to account for the surplus that we expect in the general fund. While we did show in budget amendment number 3, approximately $20 million increase to fund balance, that was to be very conservative, to allow campuses and departments to use whatever remaining budgets they have. But if they don't, pardon me, fund balance may increase slightly more. So we're just asking the board to commit instructional continuity to a total of 215 million.
Move approval.
I was-
Does that have to be read a certain way?
No,
No, ma'am.
On it?
No.
And these are things, go ahead, I think it's, I mean, we've done this every year, so this is standard, and we all have, and you have told us, I mean, I just want everyone to understand this is not the first time that we've seen it or heard this, and you've been very good about explaining what was coming. Thank you.
Mr. Lopez, do you have a comment?
No.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the fund balance resolution. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next item, C.
The item C and D, I'll take them separately. Item D is the defeasance resolution, which we refer to as the tax rate management defeasance resolution. If we intend, as we do, the board to consider keeping the INS rate the same at 3.355 for the 12th year in a row, that will bring in excess collections, which will allow us to essentially pay off debt from 2 series, 2013 and 2018, to the tune of $76.4 million. Should the board approve it, with that amount in conjunction with all the other amounts we've defeased since 2016-17, that'll bring the total to $187 million that we've defeased since that time period.
Okay, good. I'd like us to keep track of that, just for sake of comment at some other time.
Okay.
We could put that down on paper. Okay, any comments, questions? Is there a motion?
Yes. I move that we approve as recommended by staff. No, we're gonna
It's
separate.
just item D.
Should we skip C?
We'll come back.
Okay.
This was item D.
Yeah, that's correct.
Oh, this was D?
I skipped C, yeah.
Yeah.
The one that doesn't mean anything, but okay, so that's probably why I was
So I
thinking
move
about
for approval as recommended by staff.
And we have a motion and a second to consider the approval of a resolution of the Board of Trustees as stated in item D. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. You'll go back to item C,
C,
Dr.
so
Barajas.
item C, as we discussed last week, is required under statute for the board to approve an agreement for the district to purchase attendance credits, because the TEA has estimated that we will have excess revenue, which we will not in 22-23. So in order for the board to legally adopt its tax rate for 22-23, we have to have this, the board consider for adoption this agreement to purchase attendance credits at 22-23.
Okay, I know it was a long discussion last meeting.
ma'am.
I appreciate that. Any questions or comments? Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the, as recommended by staff.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion to approve the agreement of the purchase of attendance credits. As stated, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Yes?
No, I was just
Oh,
gonna say
I'm sorry.
that, I just wanted to make a public comment on, I think this is ridiculous that we have to do this as a requirement from the state, because we're not gonna be purchasing the attendance credits. I don't know, I just think it's kind of a wasteful effort. But I vote yes, because we have to do it.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Mr. Blunt?
And I just want to, so we have it on the record again, just to clarify, it's not necessarily a disagreement with TEA, it's just part of the process. In the end, we'll all be in agreement, correct?
That's correct.
Even TEA. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Dr. Barajas, next item.
Okay, so in the same vein as item D, This is a defeasance resolution for surplus proceeds that we have from the 2010 authorization that we actually have in hand, and I believe those dollars were initially to be used to purchase land. That has not happened. These bonds were actually sold in about 2014 or 15, so we've been holding on to this cash for that long. So in consultation not only with bond counsel, but also with our financial advisor, they recommended that we go ahead and take those dollars and defease debt related to the 2010 authorization, so we're asking for that. This is unusual. This usually doesn't happen, unlike the previous defeasance resolutions, so we're asking for approval.
Ms. Chumley?
I got a question on that. So the other option of this would be able to use for additional facility needs, Brian?
Yeah, while technically that is an option, in this case, both bond counsel and our FA did not think it was a good idea because the original intended stated purpose of this was to make land purchases. We don't anticipate, obviously it hasn't happened since then, we don't anticipate it's going to happen going forward. We've got other funds set aside for just that purpose. And so because of the age, if you will, of these funds, we think better to defease, use more up-to-date funding to do any land purchasing that's necessary from here on out.
Because, well, the reason I'm asking is because in part of our conversations on some of the district facility needs, we've talked about in the past, you know, when options have come up, say a building has come up for sale, or I'm thinking about some land that was close, it's over off 16 and 4 that we had talked about for athletic facilities. So, I mean, could this be used for that?
I think it's a stretch. You get into federal tax rules dealing with arbitrage. We think it's in our best interest to just go ahead and pay this debt down. And then if later there are other funds to be used for projects similar to the ones you mentioned, we can consider that. We don't think it's a good idea to continue to hang on to these.
Because we have sold these bonds that are now, let's say 7, that we've had these proceeds, there is a requirement under federal IRS rules that say when you go out and sell bonds and you have that cash in hand, you have a reasonable expectation, it's called the reasonable expectations test, that you were going to spend 85% of that within 3 years. So you're not just selling bonds, getting the money, earning interest, right? You have an intent to use it. So this is stale in essence. We discovered this. I talked to bond counsel and the FA, and they both said, because it's $6 million, why don't you go ahead and defease a series of bonds that you sold in 2010 just to clear it. So.
Okay, I just know of some facility needs that we have in relation to some of our middle schools. So.
Understood. Just don't want us in trouble with the IRS.
No, I completely agree with that.
They come take your stuff.
I just wanted to ask. Thank you.
Okay.
Shut us down, quick.
Is there I can't remember if we have a motion on the floor.
We haven't made a motion.
Is there a motion?
So I move.
Go ahead. No,
I move that we, approval of the fees and resolution to pay down the debt of 2022-23 related to the 2010 bond authorization.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the defeasance as stated in item number E. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And Dr. Barajas, adoption of the 22-2023 budget.
Yes, the reason for the season, while we're here, so we're recommending for adoption the general fund, debt service, and child nutrition budgets. As we talked about last week, we did see a deficit reduction from 73 now down to 61.6. Both child nutrition and debt service funds show a surplus at the end of the year.
Okay, that's a short explanation for the budget. I appreciate that. We've talked about this a lot. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve adopt the 2022-2023 fiscal year budget.
Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the 22-23 budget. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. The motion carries. Thank you. And one last item.
We pay for both the debt service and general fund, so, and we do these in this particular order because it's under statute. You have to adopt the budget before you adopt the tax rate. That's just the way it has to be. So we are asking the board to consider the tax rates that we've talked about before. Grand total of 1.1901, that will be 0.8546 on the M&O side, and the debt rate of 3.355 again for the 12th year in a row.
Dr. Barajas, we do have some people in the audience and perhaps some people who will watch this in the future. Please talk about the decrease in the M&O tax rate.
The decrease is 7.12 cents, and that's really the decrease on the maximum compressed rate, and that's solely a function of the fact that we had an increase in property values from year to year. And under House Bill 3, as your property values go up, your MCR goes down. Last year we were at 2 cents, I believe, and because we didn't have such a high increase in property values, but this next year we do, which is pushing it down 7.12 cents.
I appreciate that. I just, as we had talked to people, I remember during the bond election, we talked about the M&O and the INS side, and it was difficult to explain to people that we're actually going, that their maintenance and operation tax is actually going to decrease. But this is evidence that it actually happens. All right. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of the tax rate of 1.1901 on each $100 of taxable value of property, which is effectively a 5% increase in the tax rate, comprised of a rate of 0.8546 for the maintenance operation and 0.3355 for interest and sinking, and that order presented be finally passed and adopted.
Thank you. I know that that's a script that you had to read. It sounds counterintuitive to what we just said, but we are decreasing the tax rate in spite of what that sounded like. All right. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval of the ordinance fixing and levying the Northside ISD ad valorem taxes for the year 2022-23. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries, and thank you very much. That ends 9 months worth of like birthing a baby. Okay. All right, thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is our redistricting. We do have, to our board members here, we do have our attorney, Mr. Rob Decker, and we have our demographer here, and I'm sorry, I do not know your name.
Matthew Klug.
Okay, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Okay, we do have, Mr. Decker, before you get started, I'd like you to just take a step back and explain again, not literally, not literally, but talk to us about why we're here, the percentages that we're looking for, and the fact that we have this, where we're going, the concept of census blocks, all of that, and then to our fellow board members, it's possible that we could get through this tonight and actually come up with a plan for redistricting. If after a long discussion, if we're not there, we could actually postpone the actual decision to another meeting. It is up to this board how much we decide we want to do this evening. Mr. Decker.
All right. Well, welcome, not welcome. Welcome to me. I will say that hopefully this is not as counterintuitive as the budget stuff was, but that's what attorneys do to people, so there may be some of that in this too. So if there is, I apologize. Short version of all this is, as we know, every 10 years we get the census. And when we have a census, if you happen to be a single member district, what that means is when the numbers finally come out, you have to look at your numbers and make sure that your single member districts are still going to be within a threshold, whatever that threshold is. Within the education code, that threshold means that you must have with your populations must be within 10% deviation. So the most populous to the least populous must be within 10%. So when it was done back in 2011, ultimately, even though it's the 10 and 20, it takes a year before it comes out, so 11 or 12. Move that down a little bit. And I'm pulling up some of my old numbers, so give me a second here. Back in 2010, what your numbers showed were you had a deviation with the numbers then of about 5.8% between the most populous and least populous. And that was done because you redistrict at that time. And so what you then do is you take those same districts, the same single member districts, and this is the very first task, and this is what the demographers do for us on the front side of it is, we finally get the census data. It generally takes a while, and it took even longer because we were in COVID this year. So it took them forever to push out the local census data. So which is why we're all the way at this time of the year. And you also had the last election cycle that this is going to be effective. There were people who had it in May of this past May that just went, those who are going to have November elections, and now you're the only set of group, and you're not alone, but the only set of group that at your first election since the census is in 2022. 23, sorry. Getting my years mixed up. So that's why we've been able to wait, honestly, because we didn't have that push. But we are getting now to the time where we want to do that. So the first step that the demographers did, and this is what we've talked about at the other meetings, is they take your single member districts, they take all the numbers that we get from the census block, and by the way, as I've said before, and I'm going to say it until I'm blue in the face, your census numbers are not correct. They're not accurate. The census is never correct, and it's never accurate, and it was even worse, frankly, this go round because it was right in the middle of COVID. They're short, right? But they are what they are, and that's what we're going to work with. So a lot of times when we see this, and because you've had 2 years, and because Northside is such a rapid growth area, you may see an area and think, what the heck, that can't be enough numbers. And the reality is, well, yeah, you know what, today it may not be, but this is what the numbers were from the 2020 census, and this is what we're going on. Okay, so you gotta step away from that idea a little bit too. Obviously, we all know where your main growth is, but even the changes in the last 2 years don't matter for what you're being asked to do tonight. We're taking the numbers that came out of the 2020 census. So in the 2020 census, when we did the numbers, when we plugged it into the same single member districts, we kept the exact same lines and we just said, what's the population? Your percentage differential between 3 and 4 was, a minor 77% difference. So we were off our 10%. Right? We're way out of whack of 10%, which is exactly why we needed to do the redistricting. So that's the process that we get started on. So the very first step that oftentimes happens in this is, all right, great, so we have a bunch of data. What are we going to do with the data? So what happens is we have demographers, and while Zonda is the name of the company now, many of you who have done this longer may know Templeton Demographics. That name may ring a bell with you. This is the same group. So this is still Templeton. It's the same people who have been doing this forever, and so they are most definitely the experts at this. And so what they just do as the generic front side of it is, okay, we're going to take our numbers, we're going to take your current single member districts, we're going to try to keep them as contiguous as we can, but we understand we're going to have to change some lines to try to get within the number. And so what they do is they get some feedback, which is what we talked about at the last meeting, is we gave them some feedback of, here are some of the things that are important to us in Northside. We particularly talked about we don't want to have high schools being in single member districts, right? That's not a goal of ours. We don't want to segregate in that kind of a way. Other districts may want to do that. That's something you all don't want to do. Obviously, we're trying to keep communities and voting areas that kind of assimilate themselves logically together to still keep them together. And so the demographers make kind of a best guess as to the numbers and make it want to fit. And then there were some discussions on the backside of that to say, okay, great, you've got us in the numbers. Now let's look at a couple of things, right? There's a couple of pieces here and there that maybe this doesn't make a lot of logical sense, and so we fudged a little bit here and there on some lines that seemed like it might make more sense for you all in your single member districts. One of the questions that sometimes comes up is, Okay, so you showed us a new plan and everybody's getting something different. Why is everybody getting something different? Well, the reality is what happens more often than not is to be able to get the numbers. Our goal is to get the numbers as close to 0, right? The percentage, you want it as close to 0 as you can get it. Why? Because then every vote has an equal value. That's the whole point. The 10% is if I live somewhere where there's 100,000 voters, my one vote is not the same if somebody else lives in a single member district that has 10,000 voters. If I'm in a 10,000 voter block, my vote counts a whole lot more than if I'm one of 100,000. So that's why we need to get it, 1, legally we have to get it within 10%, and then 2, oftentimes part of the goal is we want to get it as small as we can. But you juxtapose that with, well, but that doesn't make a lot of sense with our lines. And so it doesn't have to be as low as possible. That's not what the law requires. It just requires within 10%, but that's part of what we look at. And then as we've had conversations several different times too, we're going to ultimately look at the demographics of what is in the single member districts, because that's why we're doing it. You know, ultimately once upon a time this was done because there was lawsuits that said we needed to do it so that we could have minority representation. And so we will, and the numbers that we put out, that the demographers put out, will obviously break it down by ethnicity to make sure that our single member districts are still providing an equal access to the vote for all of our demographics. Again, as I've said to this board several times already, because of what your population is within Northside, it's not a huge battle to do that. You are a minority majority district, and so when you do the single member districts, you would really have to gerrymander it to create not a lot of minority majority districts. And so that's not where we are. I mean, that's not even part of the discussion, but I just say it out loud to you. So what you see up on the map, up on the screen right now, is hey, here we go. Here's what we've come up with as the demographers with some input from everybody else that gets us within 10%, that keeps us mostly similar single member districts. There are changes in every single member district, because ultimately when lines were being drawn and to get to a number that made it, you know, as low as we could get it and still made sense, it ended up we pulled out of everything. Or pushed into every single member district. And so as opposed to trying to singularly keep things, any single member district the same, the general practice of what Zonda and what demographers do is they're going to shoot for the goal and try to get it to a small number with minimal changes. But that's part of the conversation that happens tonight. That's part of the conversation that happens with the board. That's the whole purpose, and that's why the demographers are here tonight is we don't own this plan. The demographers don't own this plan. I don't own this plan. This is a best guess effort to try to get you to a jumping off point. And if there are pieces and there are areas that we want to question, that is why the demographers are here. And as I've said to you in the past, they have the ability to real time move lines to basically a street over, and I'll get to the census blocks in a minute. But what their system will show us is, okay, I want to move this line over a street. And what his system will show you is, okay, well, that street's right in the middle of a census block, and we cannot break a census block. And that's the feds just define what the census blocks are. And so what will often happen is while we logically may say, well, I just want to move it over one street, that's where the logical break is. If the census block doesn't agree with you, we lose. And so what he would then have to do, and you'll see it if we change any lines, it literally will grab the whole census block. And so sometimes what happens is when you move the whole census block, you only really wanted 20 people, and I'm just throwing out random numbers, and instead you get 200. And it'll repopulate all the numbers, and sometimes when we make those changes, it creates a problem. Now, you all are bigger, which gives you more flexibility about that, quite honestly, because when you're in a very small district, when I change any number, right, it's going to change the percentage in a hurry. Because your numbers are so much bigger, it takes more of a change to create a percentage change, right? So in a small district, moving 10 people may all of a sudden jump me out of a number. Moving 10 people in your districts isn't gonna, we're too big of a population, it's not gonna change it. It's gonna be if you get a couple of hundred.
I know you're not done.
Nope.
But, how many people in general are in a census block?
I don't think there's a.
There's no set number. It could be 0. It could be 500. It could be.
Okay.
And it can't even really explain to you how they decide their census blocks. I will tell you in some of the ones that Matthew and I have done in other districts where we're like, oh, well, we're absolutely going to be moving it here. And as soon as he pulls up the census block, it's like, are you kidding me? Why is that the census block? That makes no sense. We got no control over it.
Well, and Rob, you've told us a bunch of stuff. We've met a couple of times on this. So I'm kind of, unless there's just something that you're dying to tell us.
No, ma'am.
I'm ready for us to look at the lines and it's Matthew?
Yes.
Matthew, is
Wait,
there
but
some,
Ms.
can
Chumley,
you show
before
us
you-
subdivisions too? I'm just asking.
Before you get
Sure.
going, is there anybody that has any questions before we start moving? Dr. Harrell?
So just real quick, I want to go back when you were level setting. So this, we have some flexibility in the sense of looking at the 2020 census, but we're also looking at, are we looking at any projected growth?
No.
That's not on the table,
It
even
is.
though we know for sure.
You may not do that. You may not. I mean, now you can say, hey, look, I'm going to try to plan ahead. The reality is you're not going to be able to plan ahead because in 10 years, a whole lot changes that you're honestly not even expecting. You can in your own brain want to think that way, and we can think, hey, let's not make this one single member district so big because we know next time it's going to be the one that blows up, so let's try to keep it smaller in hopes that we get there. The reality is in 10 years, you're going to be beyond 10% because everybody's beyond 10% every 10 years. So, yes, you can do that. Is it legally part of the process? No. Can you get out of 10% saying, hey, we know that this one's already going to blow up? No, you cannot do that. But you could certainly say, in your single member districts, looking at 4, I think is one that we know has a lot of growth into it. So, hey, let's try to make it a smaller number today because we know in 10 years it's going to be a whole lot of a bigger number. You can do that. You're guessing.
But not only are you guessing, but in reality, you're going to end up changing very likely due to growth in 4 and 7 regardless, right? That's going to be, in 10 years, that'll be unavoidable.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Lopez, your light is on. I don't know when that. And when we go on here, what I'd like to do is if trustees have questions, if we can have a couple questions, because I think a lot of us have questions. I'd like to do a couple questions from one trustee and move on, and then we'll go back again. Everybody will have an opportunity to ask everything, but I'd like to keep moving from trustee to trustee. Mr. Lopez.
Rob, thank you very much for giving a good explanation of what we're trying to do and achieve, and anything that really helps us out. It gives us a visual, or somewhat of a visual, but then having the demographer here as well will kind of help us see the things that need to be changed on there. One of the things I did want to ask you was, were we able to put the precincts on the map as well as a layer?
Yes.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else right now? And do we want to, I know that there's some trustees here who would have questions specifically about their single member districts and about possibly adjusting a certain portion of it. So if there are any trustees that would like to do that, we could do that now and perhaps, make one adjustment and then that affects the neighboring district and continue on. So, Mr. Medina.
Thank you, Ms. Freeman. So on the analysis, it specifically gauges citizens that are voting age, so citizens that are 18 and greater. Does it take in consideration of those that are active voters?
No.
So it's just so there could be, let's just say in District 1 of, we'll say 100,000 18-year-olds and greater, but less than 2% voting. Right? There's no tracking of.
It's just 18 years or older, and if they're a citizen, that's it.
No.
So there's no other resources that were used
No, sir.
to
to who actually voted no. Because again, this is about the census. And that's just the process that the law requires that we're using to be looking at the considerations is the numbers under the census.
Does it identify those numbers that people that are unable to vote in that area, or just the age?
It's just those who are eligible to vote.
That's 100% right. Okay.
There's really, I guess, more information on that. There's really no way to predict from one election to another who's voting and who's not voting. Even an average, we've kind of blown that out of the water in the last couple elections. Dr. Harrell?
No, I was just gonna say, I seem to be, I thought I pulled.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, frequent voters. There is a report.
What you all can absolutely get that
Right,
data.
but
I mean, that
you're
data
just
is
saying
absolutely.
We can't use that to determine.
Correct. That is
Just-
not that is not part of these
Gotcha.
calculations. It is absolutely information that is out there in Bexar County and everywhere else.
Right, okay. I can wait for the rest of the questions.
Ms. Saldana?
On that census totals, the Plan A analysis, that yellow box, citizen voting age population, are they talking about, are they saying that the citizens are they comparing citizens versus non-citizens? What does that box mean?
So yeah, that's 18 years or older and a citizen, and that just
And
looks.
a citizen,
Yes,
so
ma'am.
they are talking about American citizenship.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Because that again relates to who has the rights to vote. That's some of those things. Now, and again, that's not the population number that's drawing the lines. That's information to you, and that's part of the calculation that we do want to look at to see and make sure, hey, are our numbers, do we still have minority majority situations even in what we call it a CVAP? I mean, that's just the letters that are there. That's part of what you look at, right? And that's why we're providing that information to you.
Okay. Anyone want to make a comment on their single member districts and talk about moving if you want to adjust anywhere?
Yes.
Mr. Lopez?
So I'd like to look at single member District 2.
Sure.
Matthew.
Yeah, Matthew's going to be your helper on this part of it.
So yeah, we're just looking at the software right now, and this is Plan A, and then in the red here is single member District 2. And I can zoom in however much we want and select census blocks and move them however we'd like to.
Okay. I'd like to look at the block or where the section is. If you look to the right, if you scroll down to the right, now go up a little bit, where there's that little outlier right there. No, not that one. Go to the right a little bit further.
Up above in the right-hand corner.
Right there.
Right there?
Yeah. What does that look like? Because I see that, and I know that area, so it's kind of just like, it just seems just out of place. Is that somewhere we could just kind of just
So the
put a line
black
in there?
the
Not sure
black
if that's
line.
a census tract or not.
So the black line here is 2010 boundaries. So there's no change right here. We didn't move it. We can experiment with that and make it look cleaner, sure.
That's what I was just looking
Yeah.
for, just to, straight in boundaries, right? Where
So
it's-
I can select a census block there, right? That's a census block.
So that's one census block?
That's two.
3.
Oh.
Well.
We don't want that.
He mixed.
So that's just 4 census blocks right there. We can move it to District 2 there.
Into 2 out of 3.
What does that do to 3?
Takes it.
So we'll look at the numbers here after we swap it.
I'm not familiar with that area. Does that split a neighborhood? Does that split a neighborhood? Is that a consideration for you?
Which high school?
That's the,
It's Holmes. It's
that's the
mine
Holmes
right
High
now.
School right now. I think the neighborhood association in that area is, can't remember.
We don't
Meadowville?
necessarily have to, I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, and
Because I know
again,
that was a,
to what Matthew was saying is he just carried over
Right.
where you were.
right.
Again, not
There may be a reason why they did it in 2010. I'm not too sure why, we just left it as is. But doing that change, it doesn't take anything out of balance. So if we wanna clean that up, we can.
Could we see the balances? I mean, just when you talk about balances, what are you showing?
So,
It's hard to see that.
on the left side here, these are the numbers. I know it's probably kind of hard for y'all to see, but anytime a change kind of throws things out of proportion over 10%, we'll get red boxes. We're not seeing anything like that.
How much of a change did it make? Could you say what percent of the change?
So let's see here.
From
District
original
2.
back to the new.
I mean, it's like,
So District 2 right
it's
here.
like
this
200
change.
people.
92.
It's like 200 people. It's 203 people.
And Matthew, do you have streets? I was trying to figure out streets,
Mm-hmm.
because that will help me to understand what that subdivision, what that area is.
So the streets here, this is Ingram
So where's
Road.
Ingram?
That's Ingram.
Ingram,
Is at the top of it.
Warhawk Drive here.
You know where Linton?
So that's
Oak Hill?
Powell.
Oak Hill Road, is that Oak Hill?
This is Oak Hill going north
That's
south.
Linton, that's where Linton Elementary is at. So
So
Linton
you're
Elementary
taking
further
everything,
down.
you're taking everything on this side of Ingram then. And I just had that little,
Yeah, you
I
just
just
have
had
that
that
little,
little, that
that little
subdivision.
geographic area right there.
Yep.
But you still have Holmes High School as part of your,
I don't think so, Gerald. And that might be why we did it.
no, Holmes High School goes across the street.
Yeah, you're,
Yeah,
you're,
I'm
south, you're south of Holmes.
Yeah, you're still in Holmes High
Yeah,
School.
so I still have homes in mind.
So this is Holmes right here.
Yeah.
There's the field.
So the boundaries for Holmes High School is across the street as well.
So it is right next to it.
I mean, the area for Holmes High School goes all the way across the street as well on Ingram Road, am I correct?
So there's the main campus there. I don't know if we can see that well. And then going across the street.
That's 410 and Ingram Mall, or Ingram Road.
Is that?
So I'm getting Star in SeaWorld.
No.
That is homes too.
Isn't across the street where the gas station is and all of that?
That's
It
Holmes High
is.
School, yeah.
So that doesn't look like that would be part of, from looking at the map, if you close that.
Yeah, that's Ingram Mall to your left, that's Ingram Mall to your left. Go to your right, that's where the gas station is on the corner, right there.
And all those homes
Those are all-
would not be in the same district, would it?
Those are in Holmes High School.
No, we're confusing single-member districts and high school boundaries.
Right.
All of this
Right.
area is in the Holmes High School attendance boundary, but they're in this map, they're in different single-member districts.
Right.
What's north of Ingham Road is in single-member district 3, what's south of it is in single-member district 2.
Except for that small little
Except for
4
one area.
pieces that we just took.
So let me ask
So
Matthew.
homes would be in District 2.
No.
Yes.
Holmes is physically located, the campus itself.
Matthew, do you have the ability to layer school district boundary, or you don't have that ability to
No,
layer
but
school
let me
district
ask
boundaries?
Not on the fly right here, but I can look at that and
So-
provide maps.
Yeah, I was gonna say, maybe having the ability to put the high school boundaries, one color, elementary school boundaries, one color, and then, middle school boundaries on another color. That way we can geographically really see what we're looking at when we're talking about if all the high schools and middle schools that we're sharing. Looking at all of that, giving a visual.
I think the
Right now,
board,
we're getting confused.
I think the board needs to come to an understanding as to whether that's important to us or not. We have never taken school attendance areas into consideration.
No, I know that, but what you're saying is that we're all sharing different school boundaries, and I'm just showing.
Right.
I'm just asking if that's part of what we're, not that we're deciding on it, but let us see that ability too. That's all we're saying. I'm not saying we're making a decision based on school boundaries.
Well, and Karen, I'm not sure, because we have said that we don't want to be one high school in feeder pattern.
Right.
So we have talked about, that we share high schools so that we don't become, more along the lines of what the city council or, some of the other hierarchies on political positions get. So Matthew, that was one of the things that the board had talked with Rob about. So did you take that in consideration when you drew these first lines?
I'm sorry, took what in consideration?
So one of the things that the board had said, that we'd asked Rob to relate to you was that we did not want any single member districts that were only one high school boundary. So did you take that in consideration when you drew these lines?
No, not with this plan, no ma'am.
We didn't get the boundary lines of the high school. We did map in where the high schools were physically located, and shared that and with administration and just had a conversation of, does this look like it's creating that? But we did not do the physical overlay of the high school boundary lines.
So Brian, the discussion with administration, did
Yeah,
that?
I mean, basically we ignored both high school boundaries and the physical location of high school. Because that, in my mind, is consistent with what this board has always wanted, where we did not look to do that as a reason. And of course, just like it was in the current single member districts, there are some that have more than one high school. There's one that has actually only one magnet school. It doesn't have a comprehensive high school. That continues to be the case.
But Brian, so are we saying the same thing? Because it has always, every time, and I don't know how many times I've done this now, 3 or 4, that has always been a comment, a statement of the board, that we did not, outside of health careers, that we did not want any trustee to only have one high school. That has always been a statement that this board has made. And so, are you saying that the discussions you all had followed with that?
I'm saying I'm ignorant about how many high schools are in each single member district. I don't know that off the top of my head. None of that was prioritized in this.
Okay.
Also, if that was a consideration, if I had to look, I would think all of O'Connor might be within my single member district. And I think that's been like that for a long time.
So then could we add those boundaries as a layer to be able to see that, give us a visual, so that way there's no confusion, there's no, well, no, you don't have Holmes High School, you know, or yes, you do have it, no, you don't, whatever. Would that be a possibility that we could add those layers on there?
It is, I don't think,
It is,
we
but
don't
I
have that
think,
capacity tonight.
Karen has a point though, it may not
Right.
be, Gerald, it may not be important to the rest of the members of the board.
We have school points. We don't have
on
attendance
that.
zones.
So why wouldn't it not be important? If we're saying that it is, that we are following this and we're following what we're talking about, then why wouldn't it not be important to have it on as a layer so that way we can visually see it?
Because we've always said, because forever, I mean, since '95, we've always said that we are elected by single member districts, but we represent all students, in
I'm not questioning that.
in the
I'm
school
not-
district.
I'm
So-
not questioning
I know,
that,
but
though.
I guess what I'm kind of talking it out myself, Gerald, is that, so kind of what I'm thinking is, okay, we've said that was important, but if we follow true to our culture, which is that we represent all students, we don't represent just kids that go to schools within our single member district, then it may not be as big a deal, and it may be something that we've always talked about that really doesn't have a point to it.
One other comment that I would add is because this, whatever gets decided in this process is evergreen for a decade. School boundaries frequently have to change because of demographic shift. And we cannot make that staff beholden to single member districts and changing school boundaries for whatever reason, because of growth, because of loss of population, whatever the reason might be to change the boundary. So I would be very, very cautious of tying this relatively long-lived decision to anything having to do with school boundaries.
Okay, thank you. I am not saying to tie this decision by putting the layers of the school district and the boundaries. I am not saying that we're making our decision on that. I'm just wanting that as a visual for all of us to see that. That's all I'm asking for. I'm not saying we're gonna make a decision on that.
Madam President?
Yes, Dr. Harrell.
I was just gonna add, I think one of the things that going back to what Melissa said, we have said all about students, we take care of all kids. And already I've heard like 3 times, my high school. It's our high school, it's our children, and I'm getting concerned that this ownership over one school, maybe it's not ownership, but I don't wanna see where the boundaries of the schools. I mean, I'm gonna take care of every, kiddo in the school district. And this is my 3rd term, I don't remember that we've talked about, it in this way. So maybe it's just kind of anti what we've been saying. And I'm getting a little concerned about that. I'm just saying out loud because I have a hard time with lines.
I guess I'm not hearing the my.
I heard it 3 times.
I've never heard, who said that?
If I said it, I didn't catch it like that because I want us to be more
Okay, so
inclusive. So your feeling though is that just adds to that. However, our culture has never been that.
I didn't think so, but I have heard it and I did hear it. And I don't understand why we need where the schools fall. If we truly believe that we're taking care of all our kids, no matter where they live. And I get what you're saying. It's just not gonna make a difference to me.
Okay, so thank you. I mean, and I just want to clarify, the only reason why I asked for boundaries was because people were questioning already, well, what boundary is that? What high school is that? And so that's what I was asking for. I was just feeding off of that question and asking for that response or asking for that, could that be done?
let's see if we can get through some of this, and then if that's a consideration at the end of it, we could always layer the boundaries on top. But if we can get through what each single member district may look like, if any individual trustees has a comment. Gerald, I know you talked about that one piece in your district. Anyone else? Mr. Medina, you had your light on.
Oh, thank you. On the analysis, Plan A analysis, there's a breakdown by ethnicity, but the only thing we're considering is the differentiating percentage of its population of voting members. So I'm kind of confused, why do we have the ethnicity if we're only looking for voters that are 18 years and up?
Because that's part of the consideration that the DOJ or somebody who's going to file a lawsuit and saying that we're disenfranchising voters is going to look at the voter populations, and so that's why we specifically pull out the voter populations to make sure, because every once in a while that can get skewed as a very different number from what the population is. Again, that's not going to happen very much in a minority majority district, but that's why it's part of the legal analysis on the backside. If there's close calls about things, we are going to potentially start looking at the voter, the actual voter age people, because that's what the elections ultimately are about, are those who are voting.
Okay. Anyone?
I did.
I'm sorry.
The lights are.
Dr.
Harrell.
So just real quick, when looking at District 6, and I know I moved since raising our family. We lived in Cross Mountain for almost 30 years. And there's that feeling that Leon Springs is not a city. We never incorporated. But there's a community of Leon Springs, and it looks like that whole community is shifted over to 7. And I just wonder what that looked like with the census blocks, because the north side, what I've been told is that there's really no growth there. So it would be minimal. I'm just wondering.
So the split between 6 and 7. So that we did mess with that a little bit, and what we ultimately did, and we did it right. I'm not going to say it's right. I'm not remotely making a comment that it's right. But what we looked at is we said, hey, look, I-10's going right here. If we run I-10 as the major divider, because it's I-10, do our numbers work? And so that's why this map came out that way, is because we just said that. Now, It's different, absolutely admit
Sure.
it's different, and it absolutely can go back to how it was, and it will not mess up the numbers, because we did it that way on the front side too, to kind of look at it. So it used to have at the very top of 7, seven has gained a little bit in the top right hand corner from 6 in this
Towards
drawing.
Towards Fair Oaks.
Uh,
Right. Where are you pointing?
or no, am I saying that backwards, Matthew?
No, you're right, you're right.
Rob, if you can just, Matthew, can you just show it where Leon Springs goes back to being whole? I don't understand cutting that through I-10, using I-10. I know y'all did that. And Rob, there are some things that we talked about that were important that I'm not quite sure were included on this. So there are some things that I'm not real happy about with some of that, but I think let's move through it. The lines look pretty good, but we very specifically, or at least I did, said that there were some things that I really wanted Matthew to be looking at when he drew these lines, and I'm not quite sure all those things were communicated. So just if there's some things or questions that come up, that's because those were things that were communicated. And so let's just, let's move on and move further, but one of them is, I think Leon Springs needs to stay together, and that's, I thought Leon Valley needed to stay together. Those were important.
The challenge is, there is no
Well, let's see.
dividing line. So, what Carol's saying is what was done before. So if we could incorporate what was
Well,
the
so
prior line.
part of your problem is going to be so you now pulled up. So this is what
current.
it looked like currently.
Yeah.
This is what it currently is.
Right.
So now we're going to have a numbers problem here, and that's why. So the Leon Springs has shifted over into 7 because of having to manipulate numbers. Now again, the whole purpose of this meeting and the whole purpose of having a demographer with y'all is, if that's not good choice, then we can change and we can try to move it back to where it was. It's going to change those 2 numbers, and now we're going to have to go find population somewhere else on a different side of the single member district to be able to get our numbers to match up again.
Well, how about this? Because I-6 now has sum of 3, give 3 back what you took, and then give the Leon Springs area back, and let's see how that equals out.
Before we start that, may I add, because I'm in District 7, Carol, I hear that in particular, is that whole piece of census block, are those several census blocks? Yeah. So is there a certain part of that perhaps I think you were looking for, because you talked about how you lived in a specific area? So
I think the whole area, that even crossing over to Dominion and the mobile home parks and some of the some of the neighborhoods that are over there, that whole area for the past, I think the school is now 30 years old, 30? I started teaching there. I'm trying to think when I started teaching there, when it opened. But that area considers themselves Leon Springs, right? A community of Leon Springs, the Leon Springs HEB, the Leon Springs. There's no incorporation. It goes back probably to where the neighborhoods have been there for quite a while. Going to your point, Karen.
is there a way to separate or to divide that area perhaps?
I don't
to
have
what
that.
you're talking about?
I don't have that answer. I think the question I originally had was, how many people are we talking if we put it back in? Going back to the census blocks, is it a lot? Is it little? Because there is a lot of land. There's neighborhoods like Cross Mountain has 5 to 10 acres. Some even have 20 or more acres out that way. But then the older neighborhoods, our church is out there. It's been there since 18-something.
So I could select whatever we want to select and find the population number.
I want to say it goes out to, it's hard to see the roads, but like Teuton Beauregard and even Babcock Road. The back way through Gray Forest, Scenic Loop Road, Scenic Loop. Is that the original chunk?
That's part of it.
Okay.
So the black lines are what your current single member districts are. So 6 had gone all the way over to that black line.
And there was another chunk lower,
Correct.
on the west, I'm trying to think what that, I can't see what that road is, but west of UTSA.
So what he's doing right now is he draws the circle, it grabs every census block in there, and then he can switch it over to whatever
It's really cool.
demographic, whatever single member district it's gonna be, and then it'll repopulate the numbers and we can see where our numbers have changed to.
Gotcha.
I'm just putting them in one,
There's not like a fixed line that's,
No,
you're in
I've
Leon Springs
looked.
and you're not.
I've looked, there is no Leon Springs map, like there is in some other municipality, because
No,
it's,
it's
as you've
more of a
said, it's not a
community.
municipality.
No, it's not.
So that's the area that's moved right there that I've selected. And the population in there is 19,363. And then we can keep going east of I-10 there and select and add to that selection if we'd like. But
Did that already throw off our 10%?
so I'm just getting the numbers here. It will. I'm just getting the total population of the area.
I think too, we spend a lot of time thinking about how a geographical area identifies with itself, but quite honestly, many of those people don't know who their trustee is. I mean, I'm not saying that that's trivial, but they don't necessarily identify with a specific trustee because we do represent everybody. So if there's a way to even break that up to make it work with numbers, Carol, and incorporate some of that. 19,000 sounds like a lot, but I don't know that.
That's not.
It's not like.
We could look at it and see, come up with another plan with that option.
So our goal, as you can see on if you all have up the little chart on it, your goal is 95 is the average. That's what you're trying to shoot for. And in a magic world, if everybody had 95,000 in their single member district, we would be at equal populations. So when you're taking 20 and changing it, you're probably, we're probably getting outside of 10% deviation.
So can I ask about, so see that little arm that comes off to the left? What if you make that straight, give that to Karen? See the little arm I'm talking about? Yep. And then come down to 3. Come straight down.
Just deselecting these real quick.
Leave those with Karen. Though I don't know how much it takes away.
So this little wedge here is only 595 persons. So we're gonna have to make further changes to make that adjustment. A change like that though is not really something I can do on the fly. That's quite a bit of movement, so.
See, the other piece of that was if you go down under where 6 is now into 3 and give that to 7. I don't know if that resolves the issue, and I don't know what it does.
In this area?
See the area that is 6, right in there,
Okay.
and that's contiguous with 7, would that equal it out?
So we could,
Would that give,
You did add that area though, right? Right where that arrow is? That's
No.
already moved over.
no, that's moved over to you, but what I'm saying is give put Leon Springs back on the top and take the bottom to Karen.
I think, so I had, there were
Swap
two
top for
maps,
bottom.
that line looks like it was meant to be moved over, where the arrow is. Because the first map doesn't have the line there.
Yeah, the arrow there is, I'm showing that that's already on the map, the plan, Carol.
I mean, a lot of what you all are talking about is going back to how it was in 2010. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that in essence is a lot of what you were doing, and a lot of what was designed on this was to try to use. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying this was the logic of it was to try to use some of the major roadways as being more of the lines where we're drawing it. So you can see what Matthew had done on this was the 7 and the bottom of it was running off onto 410. I think that's 410 if I can see my own map big enough now. Or is that 1604? That's 1604. So having 1604 being kind of a marking line of an inside and an outside of 1604 to try to get the numbers there. There are no right and wrong numbers here, other than we have to get within 10% and what the board is comfortable with and how we make the changes.
Mr. Blunt, you had a comment on this particular piece? I'm sorry, your light's on. I didn't know if you were.
I'll wait till y'all finish. This is a question on 4, but I
Okay.
better wait till y'all finish
Okay.
this part of it.
All right, thank you.
So I think the bottom line in this portion of the district where we are is that in order to accomplish the goal where whatever Leon Springs is all stays together, will require more substantial changes, and it would really involve kind of a redraw of the map because it's going to involve changes in 7, very likely in 3, perhaps in 5,
And
as
4.
well, and 4.
Audit,
So it itself would have ripple effects through the rest of the plan. So if that's a goal, we'll probably need to pause and come back.
Well, and if you kept it that way, 6 has to lose something
Correct.
from.
So this is a plan that works right here. I have pulled up that we've previously done. And we're keeping Leon Springs here. This boundary is the same. And then there's a little adjustment down here, but not as much.
So that works.
Mm-hmm. So this plan does work.
And I don't know exactly, Karen, what that section is that's out of 3
It truly doesn't.
to you, but I'm not sure where that area is, so
I don't think you had it to begin with. I think that
was
was part of what 7 was.
Yeah, 7 went down.
7 went all the way in.
Oh, it was always yours.
That's correct.
So
Okay.
did 6
I kept
go
trying to
down
remember.
into 5? Did it take
Yeah, let
7
me-
5?
Yeah, if I can, the reason why things used to go down, this is a change, and it's because we have to, because of population growth. Because we used to do, what the board did before, is we wanted to ensure that everybody had something as close to 410 as possible. And over time, we've lost, 4 used to be further in, all of them, everybody except 4. 7 was the only one that was sort of not as much so, but that was something we used to talk about with past census, but we can't do that anymore.
So if that works, great. I
That
think.
what he just put up right now is a plan that we had talked we internally, Matthew, I and a little bit of administration had talked on the front side. Again, we threw together several different plans to just say
So that works for 6 and 7 right now.
it works for
Totally
all
works.
of them. That
Okay.
what he has
Okay,
up there
I'm sorry,
gives us
works
a
for
10%.
everybody.
Correct.
Carol, is that okay? Okay. So, Mr. Blunt, on 4?
Yeah, just real quick, I think I know the answer already. The area to the left of, I don't know why I'm pointing and you can't see. Yeah, good. Yeah, right there. I assume that area is too dense to go to clay and just take away the other part.
On the right-hand side.
So the reason for this kind of shape here is to our District 4 is real close with our citizen voting age population and voting age population for our Hispanic numbers. So we're right at 50%. So I had to really kind of carve out this shape to get those numbers at 50 or above like they were previously in 2010. So that shape is very carefully crafted.
Well, let me ask about that though,
Yeah,
Bobby,
I'm not
because,
sure.
because we had, so, way back when this started, 95, we had to have 3 minority-majority districts, and that was 1, 2, and 3. Then we did it the next year, and we added 4. We added 4. Then the next time, I think we went to 5 or 6.
Yeah.
So,
Now we're at about all of them, right?
we were, so I guess I'm not understanding that piece of why this had to be so.
Because part of the.
Equally crafted when we have 6 out of 7 single-member districts that are minority-majority districts.
Well, we don't have 6 out of 7.
Well,
Which
when
one
you look at,
So if you, well, again, it's gonna depend which plan you're gonna look at.
It's, I mean, I did these, I looked at the stuff y'all gave us and.
For Plan A,
Yeah.
right, which
And
we
for
now,
Plan A, it now changed.
which we now
District 1,
changed.
District
But the minority majority is 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's it.
4,
Wait,
5,
oh,
5,
wait.
District 5 is minority-majority Hispanic.
Yeah, what are you looking at? I'm sorry, because it depends what you're
Are
looking
you
at.
looking at the, yeah.
What the population percentage is all of them. If you look at citizen voting age population, it's different. Which one are you looking at?
I'm looking at totals, population
Yeah.
totals.
So which one's the federal government looking at?
We're looking, I mean, they're gonna, ultimately, if you would get sued, they're gonna look at the voting age, which is why we pull that information in there as well. And I don't have grave concern you're going to get
Voting
sued
age-
about this.
Voting age populations, I'm still showing those same things on voting age populations that.
That's what I said, depends which one you're looking
to
at. Citizen
District
voting age is
6.
different than voting age population. You have to look at every single one, there's big differences.
So is it citizen voting or is it voting age population percentages?
Citizen, because
Or it's
they're
citizen.
literally the ones who vote.
Okay, so it's, that's,
And again,
okay.
we try to
Go back
keep
and look at
as
that.
many single member districts as a minority majority. Is it an absolute no? Do we have to go to the DOJ and get this approved like we had in past ones? No, we don't have to do that anymore. That process has ended. So the only way that somebody challenges you on this is if some organization or some private individual wants to file a suit and claim that we are somehow or another denuding the minority vote. I don't think that minor of a change is gonna get there, but to Matthew's point, what he was trying to do was to try to keep the number so that it was still a minority majority.
But it's still, so I'm still lost, because, let me tell you why. Because the other is 33% Anglo, 50% Hispanic. You telling me that part, making that change is gonna make the Anglo percentage above the Hispanic? It's not that.
It's gonna make it drop below 50%, the Hispanic.
But that, yeah, but it's still, that's not considered still majority Hispanic in that case, it's still above the Anglo number. That's still
It's above it, but it's not, to be a minority majority, technically, it has to be over 50%. That's
Legally
what
or
the-
technically? Legally? No, I'm serious.
But don't we add the Hispanic and the black? And that,
it's gonna-
that makes every district.
Those are what all the arguments are gonna be about in the courthouse, right? That's gonna be what the fight is are we affecting one particular minority versus another particular minority? I mean, those would be all the battles. And so again, generically what we try to do on the numbers, on the voting age, is to try to keep the majority minority category, if it was already above 50, to keep it above 50. That's why he did what he did. Could we not do that, and would we be violating the law? No, we absolutely would not be.
No, and I'll stop on this one because I know it's getting a little bit late. But the reason why is I'm just trying to figure out, in one case, if you're doing it based on, like you said, major roads and et cetera, you'd go to Calabria. But what you're saying in this particular case, you said, well, no, we can't do that because I'm considering the citizen voting age. That was your decision tree, right?
That's right. So I'll start with major thoroughfares, boundaries, and then when I get down to the numbers, I'll kind of carve out individual smaller streets.
Okay. All right.
Same with population, right? I mean, he may have been at 11% by doing a major road, and so all of a sudden we're gonna have to say, I'm gonna have to go find somewhere that I'm gonna make a little, like that little hook that we talked about at the very beginning. I need just a little bit here because I need to get my numbers back where it needs to be.
So the last census, how many minority majority districts did we have?
In the CVAP,
5? The last census, 2010.
1, 2, 3, 4.
So that's another thing with CVAP, we don't have that from 2010.
You just have the voting age.
See, I
Just
thought
that.
But I thought we had 5. I thought, because it is important to me that we don't, like, I wouldn't want us to go down to 4, go down to 3.
But if we're
So
using,
it's a,
and this one's gotta be 4 if we're using it 50%, because we're not at 5, 5's 49%.
That's right.
We're only showing 4 right now.
Yeah,
The blacks are also.
in 2010. Correct, right. Again, if you're gonna say all minorities being a majority, but that's not often how the lawsuit would come out, because the lawsuit's gonna not be about all minorities, it's gonna be about a subset of minority, and whether that subset of minority has lost their voting power. Which is why in San Antonio, 99.9% of the time we're looking at Hispanic.
Okay, any other, Bobby, are you okay with the way
I'll wait
that's-
until everything else plays
Are
out.
we gonna get a revised map to be given to us before
Well,
we vote?
it is
or-
right, no, it
or
is,
that we're looking at it, we're not getting it
if we can,
on paper?
let's
or-
see how much we can do tonight. We've got a few more minutes left, I think. If we wanna go ahead and, do you have any questions about your district, Ms. Saldana?
Not really. I just didn't know whether we're gonna get the new map.
It will be right, that will be
No,
right
hold it,
there if
hold
we want to go
It's-
ahead and, whoa, yes.
So I'm not sure what map we're talking about right now. So
Okay.
are we talking about map A? But then you two said that's not what we want. So you're okay. So you all have not seen this map. I just want to be clear. So this map that is being displayed right now is not a map that you all have had in your possession.
We understand that.
Okay.
Okay. And on that map, Corinne, do you have any questions?
So this is what you're changing it around.
No, this is a map we had drawn before ever coming tonight as a different option of things. And so that's why we know the numbers work, because this is one that we had done with different lines, with different considerations. Again, obviously you see at the top, trying to keep 6 and 7 a little bit more of the same of how it was in the past. It makes some different it makes smaller changes down in the middle sections of it as well.
Okay, on District 5, see where the square is right there? Does that mean that that red line is now the new boundary, or,
Yes, ma'am.
okay,
The color coded is the
So when the color bleeds over the black line, that's the new change.
okay, so that one was taken from the original map, from A, right? Because
6.
it looked like.
From
on-
6.
No, I'm talking about 5.
Right. It is
5.
taking from 6. You are District 5, that block, your square,
Yeah.
is gaining that block from 6 in this new map that's being drawn.
Okay.
Is that Chavano Park or part of Chavano
No.
Park?
No.
What,
No, I don't know what that street is. I don't know.
Did they cut it out?
Or Singer County Park, and then we have Walls Creek, or Singer Lane,
by Hobby?
Ebner.
I guess it must be by hobby.
Vance Jackson Road right here.
Yeah, over by Hobby.
And that is very much gonna have to happen, because that's a population issue, right? I mean, he didn't just go do that because, hey, this looks nicer in this area. That was very much a population issue, that we needed to add population to 5
So
and
what is the
take.
red line, what's the street?
This specific
That's
street.
Hebner. It's Hebner.
Hebner.
Ebner? Okay.
So what does this do to 3? What are my numbers on 3? You've cut out a whole inner city area of 3 on this. So what did my numbers look like?
So for our VAT percentages, our CVAT percentages, we'll look at those. So Anglo 35.1%, Asian 2.2%, Black 4.8%, Hispanic 56.4%, and other 1.5%. And I can read the other numbers if you'd like, but
How did that change?
Why did you pull my whole bottom section out of my single member district.
It's
And
just
I am saying my Carol on this, cause it is my district.
to make the numbers work.
I'm just looking at numbers.
Well,
Again,
this
that's-
is the
that's-
reason why this wasn't part of the map that we initially brought. Because it does separate Leon Valley where it would have been relatively easy not to do that.
And this is all generated from that change with Leon Springs, with 7 and 6.
I can't say that as an absolute direct one-on-one correlation of things. This was a different map that was set up to make the numbers work. There were many different workings, and Matthew, if I'm misstating.
That's it. I mean, it's just a
Yes,
waterfall.
that's gonna be part of it, but I mean, it's all about trying to get the numbers to fit so that we're within the 10%. And, you know, so like on 3, because of where your population shift went, the
Yeah,
first plan A that we gave
That's
you.
not gonna work. This isn't gonna work.
This is the issue with making some substantive changes to what we know works, because it has a ripple effect through virtually the entire remainder of the plan. And the point that you make is exactly why we did not bring this map as the recommended starting place.
Brian, I'm just not understanding why taking that one little section, which was 6, and now giving it to 7, and taking the top section that was 7 and giving it to 6 affects 3. The bottom of 3.
The numbers are out of whack.
We can look at a combination of both of those where 6 and 7 looks like this, but our original plan we showed has this area back in your district. We could look at something like that.
But again, I think that that's a whole new version of a map that would need to be produced, be studied by staff, and then shared with, if it works, shared with trustees ahead of any discussion.
See, because what did you change on 5 on this?
So 5 was that change we just looked at up to Huebner?
Yeah, Huebner.
No, but I'm looking at Plan A that you sent us, and that's already there.
Right.
So that wasn't changed. So Matthew.
No, that was changed from 2010 into 2020. That is different from what 2010.
But I'm saying, put mine back, put my bottom section back, and show me what the numbers are. Because when I'm looking at Plan A with what we have right now, single member District 5, that boundary doesn't look like it's changed. So to me, the only thing that we've changed is we took the top part of Karen's, gave it back to Carol, and took the bottom part of Carol's and gave it to Karen. It doesn't look like we did anything in this plan to single member District 5 that would have caused you to change single member District 3 in the manner that you did.
I can guess what's gonna happen. It's because 2 needs more population.
But we haven't changed.
Yeah, we did.
But in this,
It went from 3 to 2.
No, but in this plan, you have in Plan A, so if I were to come in and say, let's just cut across 3 and 5, everything on the bottom, guys, didn't get changed. So I don't know why.
You can do it the science way, just try it out.
I don't know
She just
why.
said, let's do it science.
Yeah.
Let's do it right here.
Put my 3 back and leave, and take that little section of Gerald's and leave it, you know, we're giving him that little home section so that we don't have that little thing hanging out there. See, Carol, no good deed goes unpunished. I was so worried about you in Leon Springs.
Did we get a map that just showed where we are right now? I mean, it doesn't seem like there's been that.
So as I understand, what you're asking is basically just do the 6 and 7 change to A. Leave A exactly as it was,
Well,
but
yeah,
just do.
just show us what it looks like. If all you do is take the bottom of 7 and give it back to Carol, and take the bottom of 6 and give that to Karen,
I thought you just did.
so you equal those out.
I don't
And
know
then-
that they're equal.
Well, but that's
That's what we're gonna
that's
find
what I wanna see, Karen. I even said, if you need more numbers for 7, take that little finger that hangs out there, cause it looks like there's a road right there. If that's a census block, and put that into 7 to equal your numbers out. So the only thing you're moving is top and bottom of 6 and 7. I mean, I think I'm making sense, but
Yes.
I may not be. But guys, truthfully, I don't want to lose all of my inner city area in single member District 3.
Well, not for the same reasons that we kept Leon Springs together. You want to keep
Leon Valley together, absolutely.
So doing kind of defeats the purpose. Rob, did we ever get one that showed where we are right now? Like if we didn't do anything at all, how far off were we? And what?
76%.
76%.
Substantially.
A lot larger than the 10%.
4 and 3 were way off.
So there's some significant loss, if you will, in some areas and significant gains in others. And I don't know where we are with this, folks. It appears to me that we could be at an impasse here. What are your thoughts?
No, just let him put 3's
Okay.
bottom back.
Okay.
All right, how does that look?
Better.
And that doesn't create any issues
Well, we're gonna look.
number-wise.
Yeah, let's see what does it do numbers wise.
Numbers are good.
Okay.
So I guess I'm not understanding why you cut my bottom off on this.
It's just
They don't mean any personal, I mean, this is just.
Oh, I know, Karen, I'm just
Okay.
laughing about it. I
I
know
know,
that they didn't
we
personally.
don't know the neighborhood. We're just
Yeah, you didn't personally come in and do that, but that was not a good looking single member district, I thought.
Well, and again, all this change is doing is the Plan A, the one that we originally came with you on, and we're just changing the 6 and 7 borders. At the end of the day, by everything we've just said, all that we changed from the Plan A that was sent to you that you've looked at is changing 6 and 7 in their border, and I think we still have the one little
Just that
change
one
that you
cut,
had
we
asked
just
for.
Even it
Right,
up,
to
that's all
even
it
that
is.
out.
Right.
So Carol and Karen, since those are your single member districts,
I'm okay.
are you comfortable with them?
All right, any other, Bobby? Comments about,
I'm good. You compare it to the old, where everything was in and out and all over this, I'm fine.
okay, Gerald, you're good with what you have right there?
I'm good.
Corinne?
Mine looks the same.
Joseph? All right, so I thank you all, because I'm surprised where I just thought we were at an impasse. We've actually,
Yeah, it was just the
we
one.
came a long way.
It was just the one section that.
Brain dead right now.
But Carol, I just want to know, so on the left side top of single member District 3, that is now 2, what are those streets in there? What is
right?
my cutoff?
Dover
There's
Ridge.
Dover Ridge.
Dover Ridge here. North-south, that's Tezel Road.
Oh, that's Tessel, okay.
And then that's Gilbo up on top, right? The cross right up where Tezel and Gilbo.
So that's Gilbo right there.
Yeah. So
Okay.
that's where,
That's where Melissa's is, 3.
Yeah, and then come down on single member District 3 and go down to Grissom Road. I just need to understand.
Am I going the right way here?
Yes, you are, I think,
Zoom out a little bit.
so it's a little bit further up, where it kinda does a little left turn right there. Move over to the left side. Move a little bit more over to the left side.
Like right here. Is this where you're talking?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so that's Grissom Road, but I'm trying to figure out where where I stopped, because I had a large part, single member District 3 had a large part. So Timber Hill, is that past where we have our school district offices on Grissom, right? And it goes down.
You know where we had the.
That
Where
would
we
continue
had-
to be in, that would be in,
Okay, where we had the bond campaign, that's the street.
it's, all of that is because it's north of.
Sorry, you just got
Grissom.
timed out.
Oh, no,
It's,
that's good, because I can see it here.
In that map that we were just looking
Right, well, the bottom section, actually, anything left of Timber Hill, is to south. Thank you, Brian. I'm left and rights on that. Okay,
So,
I think we got it done.
So zoom out again real quick, so we can see the whole thing.
Does anybody have any additional questions? Want to see anything closer? Are we ready to approve?
Don't ask it as a question.
Well.
Okay, I'm sorry, is there a motion then? Is that what I need to ask?
We take an
Dr.
action.
Well, so you can do whatever you choose to do. My understanding of what the board had been wanting to do was you were going to pre-approve, for lack of a better way, a plan that you were then going to push out to have some
Correct.
public comment upon. So you're not technically approving the plan tonight. You don't
We're
really technically
approving a
have to take a
draft.
motion. But I mean, you can, there's nothing wrong with it, but no, we're not approving the new single member districts.
consent, you're where you need to be pending public input.
I'm real comfortable with this going to be the draft that goes to our communities.
Okay, here's what I would suggest. I suggest that we get this finalized, we get it to you in the level of detail in which you saw Plan A, which means the overall map, each single district map, and so forth. Give it a couple of days, make sure that we're not still off and more questions need to be answered. And assuming that's not the case, then we will begin to set up the public input process where we have 2 or 3 public meetings scattered throughout the district.
So let me make sure I'm clear, Dr. Woods. If this comes back to us and we have any questions on our specific single member district, we call you?
You call Kelly, and she will to Rob, specifically do not call me. And they will get those answered. Now, again, if the question is, can we move X to Y?
Yes.
Then we're likely gonna need to be in a session like this because you cannot move from one to another without impacting at least one neighbor.
But if we're all okay, I'd like to, at this point, since we're all together, and maybe we can release our demographer here and Mr. Decker, and talk about what the community dates, I don't know if you have any dates right now?
Kelly, I think we have draft dates, but obviously it was pending the length of this conversation and so forth. So yeah, we/Kelly are prepared to do that.
I don't know if I was dreaming or I don't know if I remember this correctly. At one point, we talked about 2 community meetings, perhaps one at each gymnasium. Yes, thank you.
That's certainly an option as they're, separated quite a bit throughout the district.
I don't know, would that be okay with?
I think what we'd have to look at, depending upon how quickly we need to move, is are those gyms going to be problematic because they're needed for other things, and would we do a school in close proximity instead? That would be the only.
As long as there was one on one side of the district,
That
if
we
you will,
can
on
that
the
we can
other.
guarantee, yeah, and we can put it at a recognizable facility. The challenge this time of year is you're using those gym facilities a number of nights per week, obviously.
Okay, and you'll run the dates by us then
We can send that to you this week, and then along with the detail of the new proposed map.
Okay.
So yes, we can do that, and we'll schedule them enough out that there's a little time in case y'all have feedback.
Dr. Harrell has a question or comment.
I was just gonna suggest libraries instead of gyms, but, just cause it's nice, and we have great libraries.
Oh, at campuses, you mean?
Yeah.
We
and
certainly do.
The other thing I wanted Matthew and Rob to know, when we talk, we're not mad at you. We're not mad. No, please don't take it personally. We just talk like this when we're all passionate about our kids and our communities. So, but I know I might have said something that I hope it didn't hurt anybody's feelings, and you guys are awesome. So thank you very much for sticking with us.
And to my fellow board members, thank you. I'm surprised that, quite honestly, we've got this.
I'm impressed.
I
think
am
we
too.
I think we did good.
And so,
Yeah.
and thank you to all for.
So just,
Yeah, Rob and Matthew, this was really peaceful with this group.
so just deliverable by, say, midday Thursday to Kelly and to Monica.
I mean, there's no reason
All
why.
right, I just want to make sure we can get it in this week's regular communication.
Okay, good.
Thank you all.
Good deal, thanks.
Thank
All right,
you.
thank y'all.
Thank y'all.
Thank y'all.
Yes. We do have a few more items, folks, before we go into executive. Just go through them all.
I mean, it's up to you.
All right, next item on the agenda, if I have to go back, and it is slate of candidates for TASB board officer, or board, TASB board directors. So you can open up the attachment. It has several regions where directors are up for re-election to the TASB board. The only one that we can endorse is any in Region 20. And the only one up for election of the 4 directors, and remember, myself and Ms. Williams in NEISD, we are elected by our own boards. The other 2 are elected by the entire delegate assembly, but can be endorsed by Region 20. And it's only Robert Westbrook that is currently up for re-election, and he has no opponents. So I had asked him, some directors, even though they have no opponents, they like to go in with, I do have the endorsement of Region 20. It's just a formality. It doesn't change anything, and nobody can run from the floor, if you will, as we've seen some delegate assemblies. Nobody can do that because they haven't gone through the process. But Robert Westbrook is seeking endorsement. So you all don't have any objections, I'd like to entertain a motion for that.
Karen, is he on the board right now?
Yes, he's currently on the TASB board, and he's of course serving in Schertz-Civil Universal City ISD.
I move approval in supporting Robert Westbrook, I can't even talk tonight, Westbrook for TASB from Region 20.
Second.
Did you see his hobbies?
What are they?
Gardening, obstacle course, race, and cooking.
Okay.
I know, I love that. I thought that was pretty neat.
And he's a firefighter, so there you
Yeah,
go.
I like that too.
All right, so there's a motion and a second to endorse Robert Westbrook, Region 20. Any other? He's a excellent director, would continue to serve us well. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. Next item on the agenda, if in talking to Dr. Woods, we could table these to the next meeting, or do y'all want to just knock it out right now? Hello?
Table?
First, excuse me?
Table?
Yeah, let's table it.
It's 10:20.
We can table
Dr. Woods, we could, again, still postpone these to our next meeting?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we're postponing the first reading of BED local and board superintendent goals. So we're down to executive session.
Oh, you guys, y'all should have been on the board in '95 and we went to midnight or 1 in the morning. It was 99 when you did too. That's okay.
Okay.
I'm good with it too.
Okay.
I'm tired.
We still have executive session. The Board of Trustees on August 23rd, 2020 2022, beginning at, let's take a 5-minute break, beginning at 10:25 p.m.